% of your donation goes directly to the DEC to save lives and deliver critical support where it's needed.
Britain calls for maximum sanctions against Russia as President Joe Biden demands Putin stands trial for war crimes.
Good morning. It's 6 o'clock on Tuesday, the 5th of April. This is Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn and Isabel, live from Manchester.
Yeah, we're here for the rest of the week. Leading the news this morning, this is what we've got.
Foreign Secretary Liz Truss has demanded tougher sanctions against Russia, including a deadline for ending Western use of Russian oil and gas. Speaking alongside Ukraine's foreign minister, she condemned the butchery seen in Bucha.
It comes as US President Joe Biden calls for President Putin to be tried as a war criminal.
Also today, Channel 4 is to be privatised as the Culture Secretary Nadine Dorries backs proposals to sell off the broadcaster after 40 years of public ownership.
OK, you're very welcome. Here we are in Manchester, reaching out to you, and thank you very much indeed for all your comments and getting in touch. And tell us more about this great city. We're going to be reflecting, if you're not here, if you've never been here, we're going to be reflecting lots and lots about Manchester. Let us know what you have to say, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet at GBNews.
So our top story this morning, Liz Truss has demanded that sanctions against Russia have to be stepped up to the maximum as atrocities have been revealed in liberated areas of Kyiv.
Well, in a news conference with Ukraine's foreign minister, she called for a timetable to end the West's use of Russian oil and gas and stated there should be no talk of removing sanctions while President Putin's troops are in Ukraine.
Well, it comes after evidence of civilian executions and mass graves in the recently liberated Bucha were unearthed.
President Zelensky made an impassioned plea yesterday for a stronger international response, warning that new sanctions wouldn't be enough. He added that the civilian death toll could be higher in other areas yet to be liberated.
Meanwhile, in the US, the president has responded by calling for President Putin to be tried for war crimes and vowing to supply more weapons to the Ukrainian government.
OK, let's now go to Professor Scott Lucas. He's Professor of International Politics at the University of Birmingham for his take on all of this. A week ago, President Biden, Scott, was being derided for seemingly implying regime change in Russia. And Putin, of course, he was calling for to be tried as a war criminal, which he continues to do. It looks as though he's had a very good point with what's being revealed in Bucha.
Well, I wasn't deriding him for what it's worth, because even before the horror that we're seeing coming out of Bucha and that we will see in other towns near Kyiv, we had substantial evidence of indiscriminate killing of civilians by Russians, such as the killing of hundreds in Mariupol, many of whom are still buried under a theater that was destroyed by Russian shelling. The only question was really whether Vladimir Putin had ordered such attacks or set up a system for such attacks where civilians were targets on a daily basis, a war crime. What we're seeing in Bucha is that clearly hundreds of people were killed and buried. We have evidence that some of them were executed simply because they had hands tied behind their backs. And we have a series of witness statements that testify to that. And as the evidence is accumulated in a formal way, and as this is done, as I said, in other areas of Kyiv, is certainly from a legal standpoint, I think there is a case that Vladimir Putin and military commanders could be tried for war crimes, in theory.
Professor, it's so easy after 7 weeks to not to become used to these horrors, but to just talk about it, and not suggesting you are, but, you know, we're naturally less shocked than we were when this all happened. And yet it's more important than ever now, isn't it, now that this evidence is there for the world to see, even though Russia is claiming that this was all set up and the satellites showing the complete opposite. Justice in these sorts of situations, they take an awfully long time. The ICC very unlikely to be able to try anyone anytime soon.
Well, let me say, first of all, that wherever we go with the investigation, never forget. I mean, this past weekend was the toughest for me covering a story since the killing of more than 1,400 people by a nerve agent attack outside Damascus by the Russian-backed Assad regime in 2013. And a month, a year, years from now, we shouldn't forget those who have been slain just because they were innocent, whether it was executions or in the heat of the moment. In terms of the practical points, look, I have to be honest with you. No leader who is still in power gets tried for war crimes. They would only get tried if they fall from power, whether by force of arms or their own people remove them. Think about Slobodan Milosevic in Serbia or Charles Taylor in Liberia. However, it is important that we collect the evidence, as was noted yesterday by the UN Human Rights Commissioner, Michelle Bachelet, by European Union leaders like Ursula von der Leyen and Charles Michel, and by other international leaders. And why is it important? Even if Vladimir Putin never stands trial, the importance of establishing exactly what happened so that you clearly say that these people were innocent, that they were executed or killed indiscriminately. You set that up for future generations as a marker of that we do not forget. We do not let these war crimes go, even as you noted, when the leaders of a country which may have perpetrated those war crimes have gone on an all-out campaign to push out disinformation, to bury the truth, as well as the victims.
But, Scott, as to why it's being allowed to happen, how we've got in this position in the first place, the West's reaction to what is happening. In your role as a professor of international politics, we hear our Foreign Secretary talking about the West's dependence, why France does not respond harder, why Germany does not respond harder, and Liz Truss talks about the West's dependence on Russian oil and gas. Right. Britain, to a degree, they may say, well, we're not exactly the same. But I just put it to you, these people, who on earth thought it a good idea to let Putin have his hand on the gas tap? I mean, they sanctioned it all in the first place. What on earth was going through their heads?
Well, the president of Germany said yesterday, we were wrong. We made a mistake in pursuing Nord Stream 2 precisely to put ourselves in this position of dependence. And I agree with you that on the military as well as the economic fronts, that the international community, not just Germany, not just the UK, not just the US, was too slow, was too weak in reacting. But they have reacted now. Phase A of Russia's offensive has failed. They have killed civilians, but they have not occupied the territory. They have not toppled the government. They have not detained and killed the leaders, such as President Zelensky. And in part, that has been because of significant military and economic support to Kyiv. Now, the government would like more. They would like more assistance. They would like sanctions to come quicker. But we are having serious consideration of those steps. As you heard yesterday from Liz Truss, but more importantly from the German defense minister, the consideration now of a timetable for the embargo, or at least the sharp reduction of purchases of Russian oil and gas, that is now on the table. So if Russia insists on trying to seize territory now in the east and south of Ukraine, they will face further sanctions. And I think equally important, Ukraine, quite often quietly, will be getting significant military assistance to try to ensure that Putin doesn't try to claim a victory after, well, being a war criminal.
Not buying oil and gas, is that what Boris Johnson means by maximum sanctions?
That's one of the most significant steps you can take, because you're talking about billions of dollars that the Russians collect from oil and gas. And that combined with Russia being isolated, ostracized almost from the financial community, where they're finding it hard to trade, they're finding it hard to move their money around, not just the oligarchs, but the Russian system itself, that has a squeeze on the economy. Will it topple Vladimir Putin from power? Will it completely stop the Russian military? Not yet. But it does prevent Ukraine from falling into Russian hands. And it does put pressure onto Putin to start thinking about, look, do you really want to keep imposing these costs on your country? And if he doesn't decide that's the case, maybe the Russian people and other Russian leaders decide, you know, it would be best to try to get back to the negotiating table rather than trying to kill our way into seizing part of this country.
Professor, just a final thought, about future generations and the importance to mark what's happening here. I just want to ask you, we heard yesterday the Polish foreign minister being very critical of President Macron specifically, asking him, would you have negotiated with Hitler for the way that he's handled Putin and all of this? I just wonder how you think history is going to judge the West's response. We also heard the UN Human Rights Council trying to get rid of Russia, but they haven't managed to. I mean, these are the sorts of things that future generations will be baffled by, isn't it?
Well, President Macron, who is facing an election in France within a few days, I'll let him speak to his grandstanding, both past and present. But I think it's right that we don't just look at Emmanuel Macron. This is a collective effort, and other leaders have been responsible. Other leaders have stepped up to the mark. In terms of how history will judge, history doesn't reach an endpoint. History travels along many paths. The importance right now is, rather than declaring we're at the end of one of those paths, to continue to mark what has happened, to collect the evidence of what has happened, to try to understand what has happened, and to not again, I will tell you, the Russians will go all out to deny their responsibility for what has happened, not only in Bucha, but elsewhere, to not let ourselves get distracted by the disinformation and chatter of social media from that collective responsibility, not just as leaders, but as responsible people in all countries, to say,
Lucas,
look,
thank you very
it shouldn't happen.
We've got to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed. It's 11 minutes past 6. The other news you're waking up to on this Tuesday morning is the Foreign Secretary will meet with her Polish counterpart in Warsaw today after calling for Western allies to supply Ukraine with the weapons it needs to push back Russia.
The Foreign Secretary says the UK is pulling all the stops out in a bid to ensure President Putin loses.
The government has announced that it's going ahead with plans to privatise Channel 4. The Culture Secretary, Nadine Dorris, says government ownership is holding it back from competing against streaming giants like Netflix and Amazon.
Members of the EastEnders cast have paid tribute to the actress June Brown after she passed away at the age of 95. Gillian Tailforth, who played Cathy Beale, hailed Brown as an amazing woman and a truly wonderful actress, whilst Danny Dyer, who played Mick Carter, described her as an icon in its truest form.
So here we are in Manchester, and we're going to talk about a much heralded term from the government, which is levelling up, right? So where does it happen? Where is it needed? It's the government's plan to, they say, transform Britain by giving equal opportunities to everyone, no matter where they live. Well, we're talking to people who live in Manchester today, and with me now is educationalist Kapoor, who is from the Dean Trust. He's the chief executive there. He's a man I know very well. We both sit on the Manchester United Foundation board, the charity arm of the club. And this man is passionate about education. And Taryn, you and I, when we get involved in conversations and whatever, I am aghast because there's certain areas that I don't think, when we talk about levelling up, we think we're talking about industry, we're talking about jobs. And you're at the core. Before the jobs happen, the education happens. Where is levelling up? Is Manchester being levelled up, do you think?
Well, I'm delighted you're here today. So you've started the levelling up by bringing something out of London to us. And I think our children in our schools require aspiration. Manchester's a really aspirational city. It's brilliant. This is a place I visit, I live in, I work in. I'm very proud of it. But not all the children have the same opportunities. Disadvantage, we don't really like the term, but many children don't have parents who have been to university, been to further education, so can't imagine what it's like to do something different. So we have to provide that for them, and we only work in areas where it's a bit tough and some other people wouldn't go there. So what we try and do is make relationships with people who count. Significant individuals. We have a relationship with Manchester United. We have relationships with Lord Derby and Knowsley and other people where children can look up to them. We need more businesses to take an interest. Most businesses would say to us, children don't do well enough. Well, that's a glib statement. And many people say, you're not living in the real world in school. Well, actually, I say to them, you've all been to school. That's the real world.
What do you mean by more businesses getting involved in education? Because obviously this all, when we're talking about the state sector, that's being funded by government. Are you talking about getting involved in the curriculum and in the sort of content that the children are learning, or what specifically do you mean?
This isn't about cash. It's about actually being interested, sitting on governing bodies, taking an interest in what the children are doing and making available apprenticeships, because they cry out for young people. Well, come into school, say, if you can get your grade 5 in maths, English and science, we'll give you an apprenticeship. That's really those things are really simple.
What's holding you back from that front? You say this is not about cash. Are you being funded to the right degree? How bad is the teaching crisis?
The teaching crisis is significant. We have so many teachers who join us, bright, bubbly, enjoy what they're doing. 2 years later, they've left.
Why?
Some goes to the Middle East because they can earn money, save up for a deposit for a house, come back, get back into the profession.
Yeah.
Others are disenfranchised sometimes with the whole thing. Starting salaries are not great. They are due to go up to £30,000. We're not sure when that's going to happen. The white paper has got some really good areas in it, but
to people, I just know people will be looking at the screen, some people, and they say, what are you talking about? You finish at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you get 6 weeks off in the summer, you get Easter off, you do all this, and they think teaching is easy. How would you counter that?
Well, I never argue and say, oh, it's terrible, we have to work through all our holidays. We don't. But actually, the pressure on the teachers to deliver is significant. I think the last 2 years have shown that. COVID has been a kick in the teeth for us because teachers have had to work differently. They've had to operate in a different type of way. Remote learning is a nightmare for parents, for children. Teachers have coped really well with it, actually, and we're still doing some remote learning because attendance in British schools is low.
What's the fabric of Manchester like in terms of ethnicities in schools? Because a big problem and a big challenge, I suppose, not problem because it brings a great deal of richness, is the many languages spoken in schools, and it's often difficult for teachers with lots of children, up to sometimes 13 or so different languages in one class.
60 languages.
Right, I mean,
60.
In one school. I mean, is that a big challenge in Manchester?
We have a school in the centre, 5 minutes from here. It's 95% non-white. It's superb because actually the parents of the majority of our international rivals, education is the #1 area.
They see that as a way of progressing.
Many of them say, Mr. Kapoor, what are the fees? And I say, you don't have to pay. And they can't believe it.
Do you think the indigenous British population or English population has the same attitude? No. Why?
It's a difficult. We're always asked about white working class boys in particular and why they don't engage, and it's a challenge. And I think many of those issues are related to family circumstances.
Yeah. And
we have to break that. We have to almost ignore what happens at home, show them something different in school, and help them to get to that next stage of training. Yeah. Education, further education.
As I say, Taryn and I are trustees on the Manchester United Foundation Board.
That's where we need to level up.
Yeah. but an interesting point, I just wanted to explain this. We talk about football in Manchester. What we do and what Manchester City Football Club does as well, we reach out into the community, and for me personally, I was shocked about food poverty. Also, particular interest to you, Taryn, technology poverty as well. Why, when people say, oh, kids are all on devices, they watch satellite TV, they do this, explain to people, if you don't have that levelling up with technology, and I don't know where it comes from, how disadvantaged would those kids be?
Yeah, we have 7,000 students, and they all have a device. but they don't all have internet. So that's first of all a disadvantage. They can't suppose to pay for their internet provision. But by giving them a device, they've been able to keep up with what's going on. But it's where they can work in the house. So if you've got a family with 4 children, 2 bedrooms, and a kitchen where you've got to work, sometimes that's the difficulty. We're providing them with the technology. It's actually the family circumstance which detracts from learning. When we get them in school, we're really happy.
What would you say, I mean, just to finish and talk about Manchester, talk about Greater Manchester, talk about the North West, and people would say, lovely area, very nice to live in, Cheshire's very nice, Manchester's bustling, whatever. Give us a state of the nation, a state of the area. How would you sum it up from an educational perspective and from a social perspective? Because what you see and what you hear and you associate with the pupils and the parents and the authorities, London and Greater Manchester as well. How would you sum it up?
OK, well, closing the gap, as Ofsted would say, you need to close that gap. Actually, if you have the best teachers in the classroom, you don't close the gap, you actually take everybody on the tide. And actually, some at the top may even go further, and you shouldn't stop that. And what we have to provide is opportunities, great teachers, investment. We take our children into places in Manchester. Some never go to the cinema. Some never go into the city centre. Some never go on a train.
I mean, you mean that there are kids at what age that have never been 10, 12, 14, have never been to the cinema?
Never been. So we've just taken on 60 Afghan refugees as well. And we've been doing that with them, taking them to cinema, ice skating, country park. It's really important to have those experiences.
Social experiences that a lot just don't get from their
everything.
parents.
Social experiences that I would give to my children don't naturally happen with others. And that's the key.
Tarrant, so much, and we just scraped the surface there in so many ways. Tarrant Kapoor is coming back to review the newspapers with Dominique Samuels in about 20 minutes' time. We look forward to seeing you then and throughout the programme this morning. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you
very much.
Stay with us after the break. We're going to be meeting the Manchester charity worker who's helping young people through this cost of living crisis we're all facing. But first of all, your Tuesday forecast.
Good morning, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. Dry and bright for many and quite mild today, but a wet day in Scotland, and there'll be some heavy snow across northern Scotland. As we've been seeing, quite a lot of cloud in the Manchester area as well today, with some drizzly rain being caused by these weather fronts. So some patchy rain over northern England, certainly, but the heaviest rain further north across Scotland and across northern Scotland, where we've got the cold air, some snow, initially over hills today, but coming down to lower levels by the end of today. There's the drizzly stuff across northern England, Northern Ireland, but most of the day dry in Northern Ireland. Later on, we'll see some rain creeping in here. For the bulk of the south, it's a fine day, dry, bright, with some spells of sunshine and quite mild as well, with temperatures up to 15, 16 Celsius in the sunshine. But look at northern Scotland, 2, 3 at best in places here, with that snow becoming more and more of a problem, initially over hills, but by the end of today coming down to lower levels and lasting for much of the night. So that could cause some disruption. Parts of Aberdeenshire up through Caithness, Sutherland in particular, some of the higher routes here could see several centimetres of snow by the time we get to Wednesday morning. Elsewhere, we'll see more rain showers moving in. Another relatively mild night across the south, but it is going to start to turn colder during tomorrow. Still, snow falling across northern Scotland. Rain showers chiefly elsewhere, but the showers for central and southern Scotland, Northern Ireland may start to turn a little more wintry by the end of Wednesday. Certainly rain in the showers zipping across England and Wales, so a different feel here tomorrow. A gusty wind blowing those showers through, meaning the sunshine won't be too far away, but also meaning it's going to feel quite a lot colder. Yes, we might get to double figures, but it'll feel colder with the strength of the winds. The outlook is for brighter skies, sunny spells and just a few wintry showers, but temperatures are tumbling as colder air returns right across the land over the next few days. Goodbye.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
A very good morning to you from Manchester. This is GB Breakfast News with Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel Webster.
As you can see, sun just about to rise. We're expecting the sun to come up in the next few minutes here over that, what has to be said, a bit of a murky Manchester skyline this morning. But Mancunians all over the city waking up this morning to embark on their commute. We welcome you wherever you're listening and watching from this morning. Still to come on the show.
Yeah, and we just want to point out, if you're travelling, maybe because of the Easter holidays, school breaks, look at that. Travel chaos is continuing for a lot of people planning an Easter getaway. What we're going to do, we're going to be live from Manchester Airport around 6:45. That's when the sun is due to come up. And just before 7...
we will be introducing you to Ada. That is the world's first ultra-realistic artist robot who's been showing off her skills ahead of a special
Could I ask you
exhibition.
what her skills are?
Well, painting. Apparently very, very good at them, but she doesn't seem that realistic.
I did a programme on robots that looked like that, and they weren't used for painting. But anyway, we want to hear from you throughout. We've got lots of views. Thank you for that. We're going to reflect those very shortly. GBviews at gbnews.uk, or you can tweet
at GB News.
Good. OK.
Now, it's no secret, is it, Eamonn, in particular? We love Manchester. Really, it's the GB News heartland, it has to be said. That's why we're up here this week to say
thank you for our increase in audience, which is coming from you and
a
everybody
warm welcome.
around here.
Really warm welcome. Everywhere we've been, people have been so enthused to have us out of London. So thank you for that. So we really do love Manchester. And somebody else who loves Manchester, Eamonn?
Yeah, this is Jed Carter, and he is from We Love Manchester. And We Love Manchester, Jed, is a charity working to support young Mancunians and local communities. Why do you love Manchester, Jed?
I came to Manchester when I was 18 to study, and I've never left. It's the warmest city, it's got the greatest heart and soul, it's the capital of England, Eamonn.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. What can you do for people within Manchester? Who are you trying to help? Tell us about where you reach out and how you can make a difference.
Well, our biggest fund is called the Manchester's Rising Stars Fund, and you look across the city centre of Manchester and it's a boom town with all the cranes and the towers, but actually 40% of young people growing up in Manchester do so in households classified as in poverty. There is no shortage of talent and ambition in those communities, but quite often money is what stops people taking their next step to success. So we say if you're an ambitious young Mancunian and you haven't got the bank of mum and dad and you know what your next step to success is, we will pay for what's stopping you from taking that step.
And is there any limit to that? I mean, people can come to you with all sorts of dreams. I mean, give us an example of someone that said to you, look, I've got these big ambitions, I've got all this talent, I just don't have the wherewithal. You know, give me X amount of money.
The only limit is the limit of the ambition of the young people. It can be across qualifications, entrepreneurship, work experiences. So we had a young woman called Rocher living independently at the age of 18 on £280 a week.
My goodness.
Universal credit, a month universal credit, and she is an incredibly talented artist, self-taught, and her ambition is to be Manchester's next go-to designer and implementer of tattoo art.
Tattoo art?
Tattooing, yeah.
So how's she doing on that, or where does she learn?
Yeah, well, you'll be relieved to know, legally, to put ink into somebody for money, you need a specific qualification, and the qualification plus the gun and the ink is about £1,300, way out of access of many, many young people. We paid for her to go on that course and to get that kit. She's now got an apprenticeship with a major salon. She's got a mentor with 20 years' experience in the industry, and she's already working and creating fantastic stuff. If we're 1% of her success, then it's a fantastic thing for us to be involved in.
What about the older generation? Because we talk a lot, rightly, about the opportunities for young people, because if we are going to, you know, improve things, the young obviously need as much help as possible. But the less glamorous side, I suppose, to all of this is the older generation, many of whom, after lockdown, so lonely, so in need of support, and so many charities struggling. Where do you step in with that sort of thing?
Well, another fund that we run is the Stronger Communities Fund, and one of the key focuses of that fund is tackling loneliness and social isolation. So we had a project about 3 miles just up the road from here recently where we funded 1 year of that club to meet every week. Older residents and people suffering with dementia come every week. They have a live music band, there's dancing, there's hospitality and entertainment. The Lord Mayor's been down and joined in the dancing, and they know once a week for a whole year, because of our grant funding, they can put this fantastic event on, bring people together after, as you say, the lockdown, and really celebrate a bit of Mancunian charm.
And does your brand bring people together? We love Manchester.
Gosh, what a good question. I think so, yeah, it's iconic. I mean, we deliberately trade as We Love Manchester because it's something that's recognised globally, and
people want to belong. I mean, that's really what I'm trying to say. And you've got a city here which is multicultural, it's international. You know, people move from all parts of the UK to be here, but they still want to belong. They still want a heart, which you give at the centre of all of this.
Absolutely. There's something almost impossible to define about that Mancunian spirit. Lots of people try to, but I think you need to be here to kind of live it and
Coronation
experience.
Street.
Or watch Coronation Street.
Yeah.
Other programmes are available. So it's about a combination of the kind of the warmth of the welcome and the go-getting. There's nothing that we can't do, and that's what we try and tap into. Whether there's an ambitious young person or an ambitious community, we say, if you've got the ambition, we can help you.
Well, thank you for talking to us. That's Jed Carter. He is Mr. We Love Manchester. It is a charity. Their tagline is "Give a little, help a lot." Thank you very much. Good talking to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Do stay with us. We're going to be going through your Tuesday morning newspapers in just a moment. Today we've got Dominique Samuels and Taryn Kapoor will be back with us as well. That's in just a moment.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question.
That's two questions, actually. That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. The time's 6:33. Let's bring you up to date with this morning's headlines. Liz Truss is to meet with her Polish counterpart in Warsaw today after calling for Western allies to supply Ukraine with the weapons it needs to push back Russia. The Foreign Secretary says the UK is pulling out all the stops in a bid to ensure President Putin loses.
The government has announced that it's going ahead with plans to privatise Channel 4. The Culture Secretary, Nadine Dorris, says government ownership is holding it back from competing against streaming giants like Netflix and Amazon.
A 49-year-old British man and his 9-year-old son have been killed in a landslide whilst on holiday in Australia's Blue Mountains. 2 other members of the same family are in a critical condition. They've been rescued and taken to hospital. A 15-year-old girl is being treated for shock.
Around a third of young carers aged 15 to 17 think about self-harm. New research suggests a substantial number feel as if there's no way out, with 12% thinking about harming others, including the person they care for.
And members of the EastEnders cast have paid tribute to the actress June Brown after she passed away at the age of 95. Gillian Telforth, who played Cathy Beale, hailed Brown as an amazing woman and a truly wonderful actress, whilst Danny Dyer, who played Mick Carter, described her as an icon in its truest form.
Right, well, let's get into the newspapers on this Tuesday morning. We welcome back the Chief Executive of the Dean Trust, educationalist Taryn Kapoor, and the writer and broadcaster Dominique Samuels, who Isabel and I met recently socially. So we did, which was amazing. And here you are in the studio. Lovely to see both of you. And it's quite moving stuff. This is front page of the Daily Express, Dominique, you're starting with. President Zelensky in tears.
Yes, so this is about President Zelensky's tear-stricken visit to the town of Bucha, which is northwest of the city of Kiev in Ukraine, where he spoke about the appalling apparent war crimes that are coming out of Ukraine, children killed, women raped and tortured, and really I think it was a plea to the rest of the world to sort of recognise what's going on in Ukraine and escalate the situation formally. I think what he's really looking for now is more so in terms of military aid, more military aid. The UK government is considering doing that, but also more of a condemnation of Russia on the world stage. The frustration
must be awful. I mean, we can look at headlines, we can talk about news stories, but imagine actually being there and seeing and getting witness reports of what actually happened there. It's just bound to be all overpowering, overwhelming.
It's absolutely awful. Apparently, hundreds of bodies of civilians were being taken off of the streets, and there is a fear that Putin is planning a resurgence from Georgia specifically with about 130,000 troops, which is obviously very concerning because it means that in terms of the conflict, where is the end? And I mean, on the world stage, we're also now considering bans on Russian oil and gas imports, which will dramatically affect the European economies. But it seems that in the face of what's actually happening in Ukraine, a lot of people will be asking, what is the alternative?
And I suppose, you know, the warning also yesterday was that Bucha was just one small town, and the fear is they'll uncover much worse in terms of scale, similar atrocities in other places that have been taken by the Russians. Interesting to hear Taryn, the Foreign Secretary, yesterday saying we want to see maximum sanctions being brought in. Why haven't we brought in the maximum sanctions already? That's what begs the question for me after hearing her say that.
Yeah, I don't think there's an end game that anybody can visualise. It's on my mind all the time, actually. It's something that I wake up in the morning thinking about those poor people. And the sanctions, I think about the Russian people as well, actually, because the sanctions on them must be awful. They only hear what they hear. And I was trying to explain to some children the other day that if you only hear one set of news, that's what you believe. And I think that's the real issue for us, that Putin doesn't care about his population, and that's a huge issue.
Yeah, and I think in terms of the information that the Russian people receive, I think mostly what the information that they'll be receiving is that, you know, Russian prisoners of war are being tortured in Ukraine, because Ukraine, I think a few days ago, already announced that it was going to be investigating those claims because there was a leaked video that went all around social media of Russian soldiers apparently being tortured by the Ukrainian military. That's probably the only information they're getting. They're not actually getting the other side.
Well, yeah, I mean, go on.
Another casualty of all of this, Taryn, we move to The Guardian, could well be the climate. What's The Guardian saying about this?
Well, it's something that we've been expecting. The IPCC have put out this report to say it's doomsday scenario, and I do believe them. But it's a paradox, isn't it, that we're actually scrabbling now for more oil and coal to offset the shortages that we could have because of our over-reliance on Russia. So I think that could put us back a period of time. So I think we're talking about having a peak in a few years. Well, I think that peak might be even further on. Children, more than adults, are concerned about this.
I mean,
they talk about it all the time.
Do they?
It's really interesting. They turn lights off. They think they're helping in everything they do, and they think about their own future. And I think some adults don't think about that.
Yeah, and this UN conference yesterday talking about all of this, and it's just 3 months since the last really stark announcement was made by them. Any other day it'd be all over every front page. It's being knocked off the news, as Eamonn was saying, because of other events. Have we stopped taking this seriously as well, do you think?
I don't necessarily think we've stopped taking it seriously, but I think a lot of people, especially amongst, you know, the working class in the British public, I think they'll be wondering what the cost to us will actually be.
I mean,
because I think
the actual pounds, shillings and pence cost.
Yeah, the actual costs in terms of having to pay more for fuel, in terms of having to change what we eat, you know, the amount of meat that we eat, the cars that we drive, how we heat our homes, how we light our homes. These are all things that are going to affect us, and I'm just wondering, especially as you said, children
do you not think
are
they can
terrified.
dovetail in together? That, you know, actually you can save the planet at the same time as tackling the cost of living crisis. You're saving money by turning your lights off. You're saving money by running your dishwasher on economy at night.
Yeah, but then at the same time, we're hurtling towards this transition to renewable energy, and the technology, quite frankly, isn't there at the moment. We can't just switch off the oil and gas. We can't do that. It's not possible. People will literally be sitting in the dark and in the cold, and I think the government especially, needs to be a bit honest with these environmental campaigners and protesters about that.
What do the kids see as the answer? I mean, you know, Dominique was referring there to it's going to cost us more to be green, and just people don't seem to have the money. So, in reality, are they dreamers? Are they?
Partly, but we're a here and now society, aren't we? What's here is what we'll do. We're not really thinking about the future. Children do think more about the future, and most schools in the country have eco clubs and other things that they believe are going to help, but it's whether the government takes that seriously and starts working with the children now, actually, not just on a superficial way, but a really huge campaign with young people.
Where do they stand on what's her name from Norway?
Oh, Greta Thunberg. Yes, Greta Thunberg.
The very one.
She was a catalyst, I would say.
I think kids really like her.
So she is an inspiration to those kids.
We've had children on marches. They've taken the afternoon off to go to a march, and we have accepted it.
Right.
I think we can learn a lot from children, don't you think? Just in general, we all start off so
Very
pure.
little, actually. But a few.
We all turn so cynical and so defeatist, but kids, they have a real innocent, you know, this is good, this is bad, and they can just see things with a clarity that perhaps as adults we kind of lose.
We then make it complex, don't we?
Yeah,
We
doesn't
can
need
make
to be.
it yeah, that's interesting. Taryn, what about Channel 4, right? And people are going to say, what do they know? What do they care? People don't know that Channel 4 is part owned by the government. We'd have to say, why is it part owned? Where do we see that? All I see is, why do we worry about a channel who shows men's dangly bits in the pursuit? It's not even entertainment. It's when they try and say to you, this is a social experiment. What's that programme called? Naked Attraction,
I can't say I've
isn't
watched
it?
it. I think of Channel 4, I think of Grand
I
swear on my life.
You so have.
I've never watched it, but what I have watched on Channel 4 is things like Grand Designs or
yes, but you could have Grand Designs on
I love all
BBC
of
too.
those sorts of
I do
programmes.
too, but they won't disappear.
But is this not just the government saying that they're a bit lefty, old Channel 4? You know, the taxpayer doesn't pay. This isn't a benefit to the taxpayer to sell off a state-owned channel. 90% of it's funded by adverts. It's a culture war move, isn't it?
Yeah, you've got to look at what's happening. I've got 3 girls, and they wouldn't dream of watching Channel 4.
Oh, really?
They don't watch television.
They watch Naked Attraction.
They watch the streaming services.
They watch streaming completely, and when we put the TV on, they're quite surprised. They don't come down and watch TV with us, by the way.
And that is the concern. It's that Channel 4, with its current funding model, will not be able to compete with streaming platforms like Netflix, like Amazon Prime, because they are the new thing that everyone watches. I mean, I watch them. But one thing that I'm concerned about is that this move does open up Channel 4 being bought by foreign investors. And, you know, I'm not trying to be like a xenophobe
No,
here.
but all the stations end up the same.
Well, it's like, you want to compete with Amazon and Netflix, you end up with American.
You want an alternative agenda.
I would want it to be bought by, I think, a British investor.
British viewing, British television is different than French television, German television, American television. I mean, for all its faults or whatever, I like a news bulletin, I like current affairs programmes, I like documentaries, I like entertainment, you should have things. But when you do that Apple, Amazon Prime, Netflix thing, it's wall-to-wall, very nice drama series, but there's nothing else. Where do we fill in the gaps? I would say...
You see that when you go on holiday, don't you? And the first thing you do, you put the BBC News on, or Sky News,
I don't know about that anymore, Taryn. You're talking to the wrong crowd.
All right, something on you can relate
GBNews is
to.
available all over the world, in case anyone's
Your
worried.
biggest dread is to arrive in a foreign hotel room and the only English-speaking channel is BBC World. The most boring channel ever invented. I mean, what is that all about? But I do say...
people put that on, don't they?
But there's nothing else.
So the point I was making is that there isn't the breadth and the quality overseas. You watch French TV, it's dire.
But they're very protectionist in France, and they have a very small percentage of foreign influence when it comes to their broadcasting, and I think there's a lot to be said for that. You know,
Taryn, I can definitely... I wasn't from an academic household, and I would say most of my education was supplementing my books and things with what I saw, particularly on BBC television, in terms of dramas, in terms of programmes like Horizon, on ITV with programmes like World in Action. There was just so much that it's there if you look for it. I don't understand. I say to one child in particular who was going through exams and he was studying the Second World War, and I said, what are you getting overwhelmed with this? There are programmes upon programmes on channels here, on the Battle of the Bulge, on the, you know, the Ardennes, on everything that you want. It's all there. And you can supplement what you do with visual stuff, and the quality stuff is there.
It is.
Yeah.
For now.
For now. Like us. Like us. Have we ever been called quality? No, not guilty of that. Not guilty of that. Dominique and Taryn, thank you both very much indeed. The guys will be back in 45 minutes' time. Thank you.
With the time at 6:46, let's take a look at this morning's headlines. And a happy life, different plans and dreams for the future have been lost. Those are the words from the people in Bucha, the city on the outskirts of the capital, Kiev, brought to ruin by Russian attacks. Bodies with bound hands and signs of torture have lay scattered across the streets after Russian troops withdrew from the area.
plans to outsource migrants to be processed abroad seems to be a step closer, according to The Times. Under the Nationality and Borders Bill, the government would fly asylum seekers to Rwanda for processing and pay the country as part of the deal. Ministers believe Boris Johnson will make a formal announcement if the bill passes through Parliament next month.
Labour is warning that poorly insulated rural homes face higher energy bills than those in urban areas. The party says a reliance on oil and a lack of energy-efficient properties is down to 12 years of Conservative failure. We'll be asking the Shadow Culture Secretary Lucy Powell for her thoughts on that issue a little bit later in the programme.
Right, we're in Manchester. We're going to go to Manchester Airport. Let's go to Bradley Harris, who's there. Bradley, big disruption there yesterday. So many flights cancelled, big delays. Has that rolled into today?
Yeah, unfortunately, Eamonn, it has rolled into today. If you are planning to go abroad and are flying from Manchester Airport today, certainly check before you travel and really do leave as early as possible. I've been taking a wander around Terminal 1 check-in hall this morning at about 10 to 5, and still right now there are huge queues tailing all the way back outside of the terminal building into the drop-off zone where taxis and other cars drop off passengers. We're talking hundreds of people waiting in queues, and that's just to get into security. Lots of chaos, lots of people confused, not really knowing where they're going. Staff are doing their best to manage the situation, but of course at the moment Manchester Airport don't have enough staff to deal with the chaos that is going on at the airport right now. That's because many people are either off sick with COVID, and if you remember, during the pandemic, they had to lay off loads of staff to try and save money because, of course, profits weren't where they normally should have been during that time. Now they're scrambling to try and hire more people to try and deal with the sheer amount of passengers looking to get away for the Easter summer holidays. In terms of the airlines, though, Eamonn and Isabel, EasyJet are set to cancel 60 flights across the UK today. Yesterday, they cancelled 62 of those flights, and on the weekend it was 222. British Airways at Heathrow Airport cancelled 115 flights yesterday. No word yet on if any more from British Airways are being cancelled today. Of course, if I hear any more, I will update you on the breakfast show this morning. EasyJet said in a statement that they said staff absences were double their normal levels due to COVID, and they said that we expect to make similar levels of preemptive cancellations over the coming days due to the ongoing high level of sickness. And Manchester Airport have said that they've admitted passengers' experiences fell below the standard we aim to provide and have apologised. So look, this is the first time that people have been able to get away for the summer, for the Easter, I should say, school holidays since COVID restrictions for international travel were dropped. So people have been coming here hoping to get away. Some people have been telling me that they've been waiting for around 3 hours just to get their flight, and still even then missed it. So at the moment, lots of travel chaos, and it's set to continue for the rest of the day. Eamonn and Isabel.
Mate, keep us posted. I have to say, when I get up early to catch a flight, Bradley, you always feel as if you're the only person in the world who's up at that hour, and then you arrive at an airport and you see the baggage handlers, the engineers, the cabin crew, the check-in people.
The TV screens on with the news
security
reporters
people
up and about.
Yeah, Bradley, pop inside there, make sure we're on their TV screens. Just switch them all to GBNews.
I'll get the remotes, I'll switch them all on.
Do it.
Good man.
Good stuff. Thanks, Bradley.
Speak later. Thank you very much indeed. If you are travelling today, good luck to you. Hope it goes
let us know
smoothly
how you get on. Now, the world's first ultra-realistic artist robot has been showing off her artwork in London ahead of a major exhibition in Italy.
She's called Ada. And...
Do you see what they've done there? Ada. You know, spell Ada, because she's AI. Anyway.
Artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
Too smart for me. So Ada has an arm that paints, right? And anyway, here's a report. You'll see all of this, and from our reporter Alice Porter on this one. Okay, here we go.
I like that my art creates good discussions.
Can artworks produced by machines be called art? That's the central question posed by Ada, the world's first ultra-realistic artist robot. Aidan Miller will be curating Ada's exhibition at the Venice Biennale.
How can a robot be an artist? Surely they're just running programs. Well, that's because people are not aware that how the nature of programming is changing with the rise of the algorithm, the way that artificial intelligence is enabling the programs to make decisions. And with that, it therefore is able to be creative.
The goal of artificial intelligence is to create something like a robot which can think independently, like humans. Despite the movies, we're nowhere near creating that kind of technology. But Ada shows that AI machines currently can replicate human emotions.
Where do you get the inspiration for your art?
I have a lot of inspirations from different places. I'm inspired by the world around me. I'm deeply inspired by the visual arts, also literature. Thank you for speaking with me. It is nice to meet you, Alice.
Ada's ability to converse and create artwork demonstrates how AI has become so advanced. But Aidan Miller says the point of the exhibition is not to glorify robots, but to prompt difficult questions about technology and privacy.
We are deeply concerned about the nature of technology and how it's morphing in front of us. The artworks that Ada produces are stimulating questions and engagement about questioning that very nature of that technology. We are not here to promote technology or even robots. The whole point is to question where in the world are we and where are we going to go.
Alice Porter, GB News.
What do you think of that?
I think you don't actually need a robot to do that. You can just have like a photocopy machine to do that or whatever. So you have Ada's, the gimmick behind it.
I just hate it. Every single part of me hates it.
But if, you know...
It just makes me a bit angry. I don't know why. I just have quite an angry response to
like
that.
You could talk to Ada. Ada talks back to you. She paints during the day. No trouble, no fuss.
Such a weird species, aren't we? Just...
You speak for yourself.
Just so weird. Just paint a painting. And if you can't do it, do something else. And why do you need a robot? Don't get it. Okay. They're going to take over.
They will.
They're going to come and get us.
They will take over. They absolutely will take over with all of that. Now, listen, talking about that, you've been getting in touch with us today, which is absolutely great. Dan has been in touch and he said, good morning, you two. Great to see you in Manchester. That's probably Dan Walker, I would have thought, on the BBC this morning. They'll all be watching us today. And the spirit and the love we have here is different to anywhere else. Happy to see GB News getting out of the London bubble. That's us.
John says, welcome, Eamonn and Isabel, to the beautiful sky blue city of Manchester. Marilyn says, great to see you both in Manchester. I'm in Stockport and watch you and GB News every day. Love the programme. It is a breath of fresh air.
That's good to hear. Michael, I lived in Manchester while I was a student and I met my wife here, says Michael. She's from Newcastle. We have arguments about which city is best. Newcastle is a good city.
Yeah, Newcastle is a good city. But what about Liverpool? Julie, sorry, have you finished that one? Are you still going?
Yeah, well...
Sorry, got a bit excited there on the competitive cities thread. Julie says, hi there. When are you coming to Liverpool? We have a serious rivalry with the Manx, but if you think Manchester is good, you aren't ready for Liverpool.
I'd have to have protection, maybe.
In Liverpool.
Yeah,
I think I might like Liverpool.
They're very nice people.
Got a soft spot for
very nice people when they beat United usually. But look, wherever you're from, I think Isabel, we've established this thing that it would be nice to get on the road, to go out and see more places, and maybe less obvious places as well. Yeah. But we're here because this is where our audience is. This is the biggest growth.
If you want us to come to you, you need to get everyone you know to be tuning in, because we'll only go where we've got a good reception. People.
But it is interesting. We're not just talking about Manchester itself, we're talking about a lot of in Cheshire. You mentioned Stockport there. I've had emails from people in Winsford,
North Wales,
in Knutsford,
border, don't forget,
North Wales, as well. So it's very good. And thank you for watching, thank you for listening, and we would like to pop out and see you somewhere.
Yeah, and we've got lots more for you this morning. Coming up, we're going to be meeting the activists demanding the EU stops trading with Russia. See you in a moment.
Good morning, Alex Deegan here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. Dry and bright for many and quite mild today, but a wet day in Scotland, and there'll be some heavy snow across northern Scotland. As we've been seeing, quite a lot of cloud in the Manchester area as well today, with some drizzly rain being caused by these weather fronts. So some patchy rain over northern England, certainly, but the heaviest rain further north across Scotland and across northern Scotland, where we've got the cold air, some snow, initially over hills today, but coming down to lower levels by the end of today. There's the drizzly stuff across northern England, Northern Ireland, but most of the day dry in Northern Ireland. Later on, we'll see some rain creeping in here. For the bulk of the south, it's a fine day, dry, bright, with some spells of sunshine and quite mild as well, with temperatures up to 15, 16 Celsius in the sunshine. But look at northern Scotland, 2, 3 at best in places here, with that snow becoming more and more of a problem, initially over hills, but by the end of today coming down to lower levels and lasting for much of the night. So that could cause some disruption. Parts of Aberdeenshire up through Caithness, Sutherland in particular, some of the higher routes here could see several centimetres of snow by the time we get to Wednesday morning. Elsewhere, we'll see more rain showers moving in. Another relatively mild night across the south, but it is going to start to turn colder during tomorrow. Still, snow falling across northern Scotland. Rain showers chiefly elsewhere, but the showers for central and southern Scotland, Northern Ireland may start to turn a little more wintry by the end of Wednesday. Certainly rain in the showers zipping across England and Wales, so a different feel here tomorrow. A gusty wind blowing those showers through, meaning the sunshine won't be too far away, but also meaning it's going to feel quite a lot colder. Yes, we might get to double figures, but it'll feel colder with the strength of the winds. The outlook is for brighter skies, sunny spells and just a few wintry showers, but temperatures are tumbling as colder air returns right across the land over the next few days. Goodbye.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's 2 questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Britain calls for maximum sanctions against Russia as President Joe Biden demands Putin stands trial for war crimes.
A very good morning to you. 1 minute past 7 o'clock on this Tuesday, the 5th of April. You're watching Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel Webster, live from Manchester.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. The Foreign Secretary, Liz Truss, has demanded tougher sanctions against Russia, including a deadline for ending Western use of Russian oil and gas. Speaking alongside Ukraine's Foreign Minister, she condemned the butchery seen in Bucha.
This comes as American President Joe Biden calls for President Putin to be tried as a war criminal.
Also today, Channel 4 is to be privatised as the Culture Secretary Nadine Dorries backs proposals to sell off the broadcaster after 40 years of public ownership.
And queues of confusion at Manchester Airport as the Easter getaway continues. Our reporter Bradley Harris is there. Bradley, good morning to you.
Another day of travel chaos across the UK as airlines and airports battle to keep flights in the air. Today, many are cancelled as people want to get away for the Easter holidays.
We're live from Manchester all of this week, so do get in touch to let us know what you love about the city, where you want us to go, who you want us to talk to. Email gbnews@gbnews.uk or tweet us at gbnews. So our top story this morning, and Liz Truss has demanded that sanctions against Russia have to be stepped up to the maximum as atrocities are revealed in the liberated areas of Kyiv.
Well, in a news conference yesterday with Ukraine's foreign minister, she called for a timetable to end the West's use of Russian oil and gas. And we're going to be talking about a protest as regards that next. She said there should be no talk of removing sanctions while Putin's troops are in Ukraine.
Well, this comes after evidence of civilian executions and mass graves in the recently liberated Bucha.
President Zelensky made an impassioned plea yesterday for a stronger international response, warning that new sanctions wouldn't be enough. He added that the civilian death toll could be higher in other areas yet to be liberated.
Well, meanwhile, in the US, the president's responded by calling for Vladimir Putin to be tried for war crimes and vowing to supply more weapons to the Ukrainian government.
In the last hour, we spoke to Scott Lucas. Scott Lucas is a professor of international politics at the University of Birmingham about global reaction to those atrocities.
Before the horror that we're seeing coming out of Bucha and that we will see in other towns near Kyiv, we had substantial evidence of indiscriminate killing of civilians by Russians, such as the killing of hundreds in Mariupol, many of whom are still buried under a theater that was destroyed by Russian shelling. The only question was really whether Vladimir Putin had ordered such attacks or set up a system for such attacks where civilians were targets on a daily basis, a war crime. What we're seeing in Bucha is that clearly hundreds of people were killed and buried. We have evidence that some of them were executed simply because they had hands tied behind their backs. And we have a series of witness statements that testify to that. And as the evidence is accumulated in a formal way, and as this is done, as I said, in other areas of Kyiv, certainly from a legal standpoint, I think there is a case that Vladimir Putin and military commanders could be tried for war crimes, in theory.
Professor, it's so easy after 7 weeks to not to become used to these horrors, but to just talk about it, and not suggesting you are, but, you know, we're naturally less shocked than we were when this all happened. And yet it's more important than ever now, isn't it, now that this evidence is there for the world to see, even though Russia is claiming that this was all set up and the satellites showing the complete opposite. Justice in these sorts of situations, they take an awfully long time. The ICC very unlikely to be able to try anyone anytime soon.
Well, let me say, first of all, that wherever we go with the investigation, never forget. I mean, this past weekend was the toughest for me covering a story since the killing of more than 1,400 people by a nerve agent attack outside Damascus by the Russian-backed Assad regime in 2013. And a month, a year, years from now, we shouldn't forget those who have been slain just because they were innocent, whether it was executions or in the heat of the moment. In terms of the practical points, look, I have to be honest with you. No leader who is still in power gets tried for war crimes. They would only get tried if they fall from power, whether by force of arms or their own people remove them. Think about Slobodan Milosevic in Serbia or Charles Taylor in Liberia. However, it is important that we collect the evidence, as was noted yesterday by the UN Human Rights Commissioner, Michelle Bachelet, by European Union leaders like Ursula von der Leyen and Charles Michel, and by other international leaders. And why is it important? Even if Vladimir Putin never stands trial, the importance of establishing exactly what happened so that you clearly say that these people were innocent, that they were executed or killed indiscriminately. You set that up for future generations as a marker of that we do not forget, we do not let these war crimes go, even as you noted, when the leaders of a country which may have perpetrated those war crimes have gone on an all-out campaign to push out disinformation, to bury the truth, as well as the victims.
Not buying oil and gas, is that what Boris Johnson means by maximum sanctions?
That's one of the most significant steps you can take, because you're talking about billions of dollars that the Russians collect from oil and gas. And that, combined with Russia being isolated, ostracized almost from the financial community, where they're finding it hard to trade, they're finding it hard to move their money around, not just the oligarchs, but the Russian system itself, that has a squeeze on the economy. Will it topple Vladimir Putin from power? Will it completely stop the Russian military? Not yet. But it does prevent Ukraine from falling into Russian hands. And it does put pressure onto Putin to start thinking about, look, do you really want to keep imposing these costs on your country? And if he doesn't decide that's the case, maybe the Russian people and other Russian leaders decide, you know, it would be best to try to get back to the negotiating table rather than trying to kill our way into seizing part of this country.
The take of Professor Scott Lucas there. Meanwhile, here in Britain, in America and Europe, all warnings of further sanctions on Russia for what has happened in Bucha. But should we stop trading with Russia entirely? Let's now go to an activist, Victoria Prognekiak, who joins us live from Warsaw in Poland. Victoria, you're calling for the European Union to stop trade altogether. How are you going to protest about that? Tell us more.
We have already started. We have started 12th of March at the border of Poland and Belarus. What we have done, we have started by blocking the trade, by simple physical blocking trucks going to Belarus. Why we did this? Because we see the problem. We see that sanctions are, but they are mostly on the paper. They are not real. What we have seen that within 3 days that we have been blocking the cargo traffic going to Belarus, there was 50 kilometers of queue of all these trucks that are going through the border from European Union to Russia. This is what we have done, and later what we have seen is that not the border by itself is the problem, but Germany and France who are blocking the decision about the trade ban with Russia. So we decided yesterday to block the Autobahn, to block the main highway between Germany and Poland. This is what we have done. We have blocked the traffic for more than 2 hours.
You're blocking traffic. Yeah, we're used to those protests. We have these protests in England as well, where people sit on motorways for various things. However noble, however honourable your intentions are, Victoria, I'm just looking at the figures here. The European Union, every single day, pays Russia in pounds, £850 million a day for energy. And Germany, like many countries, just can't turn off the switch. So what would you suggest when you're sitting there on the motorway, blocking the roads? Where do German people turn for their energy?
You know, I'm just a simple citizen. What I can do is to signalize to European Union and to government of European Union that we are not okay with trading with occupants, with trading with warriors. So what we suggest is to, first of all, to sit down and decide how to replace the energy and gas from Russia to other resources. European Union had enough time for this. They had time since 2014 to do so, and they did not do this. So we are right now demanding to stop trading with Russia by any means, no matter what will be the downsides of it. Because what we see is European Union is sponsoring the war, and European Union is sponsoring the genocide of Ukrainians in Ukraine.
Okay, Victoria Prognekiak, thank you very much for talking to us on GB News this morning.
11 minutes past the hour. Let's bring you up to date with what's happening news-wise. The Foreign Secretary, Liz Truss, will meet with her Polish counterpart in Warsaw today after calling for Western allies to supply Ukraine with the weapons it needs to push back Russia.
Foreign Secretary says the UK is pulling out all the stops in a bid to ensure President Putin loses.
The government has announced that it's going ahead with plans to privatise Channel 4. The Culture Secretary Nadine Dorris says government ownership is holding it back from competing against streaming giants like Netflix and Amazon.
Members of the EastEnders cast have paid tribute to the actress June Brown after she passed away at the age of 95. Gillian Tailforth, who played Cathy Beale, hailed Brown as an amazing woman and a truly wonderful actress, whilst Danny Dyer, who's played Mick Carter, described her as an icon in its truest form.
This rising cost of living is serious. It hurts a lot of you. It's worrying a lot of you. So many of you don't know where to turn. It's more than feeling the pinch, isn't it?
Yeah, and we talk a lot about the decision between heating your home and eating, but as you say, it's more than just that.
It's more buying your kids' birthday presents, filling the car up with petrol. It impacts on everyday life. I was talking to someone yesterday who just got a number of bills in, and it was all too much for her. It just was too much.
It's the reality for people who are hard-working, upstanding members of society who are now going into poverty. It's the increase in the working poor, and it's a stark reality. It's the story of 2022. Well, one charity in Yorkshire said that they really fear this struggle faced by families may push more young people into committing crime as another source of income. Our reporter Anna Riley takes up the story.
Mums United is a charity in Sheffield led by mothers tackling youth violence and child drug exploitation. The organisation runs workshops for children across the city and remains resolute in its fight to ensure greater safety and a better way of life for youngsters. But with the rising cost of living making it hard for many to pay the bills, Mums United trustee and mother Shahad Saleh fears that more young people will be tempted to turn to crime.
And every year we are experiencing a younger age of children involving in drugs and a younger age being killed by knife. The amount of people who are reporting to us that their children being subject to attempts from drugs dealer and gang to involve them in this is huge. And the moms struggling to pull the children out is very huge. Because, with these problems, again, they will be justified. I don't have anything to lose. You see what I mean? The children will come to your child. If he has no or she has no education, nowhere to go, no place to grow.
One mum in the group, who didn't want to be identified, said her son was approached by a gang.
He was 15, 16 then. I was really concerned, frightened, but with the help of Mums United, things did change. Obviously, people are wanting to make money, and youngsters nowadays, easy money is selling drugs. Holding on to something for a day or a week, they can get easy money, £100. With children, will be like, oh, this is easy money. We're not selling it. We're holding it on for somebody.
South Yorkshire Police and Crime Commissioner Alan Billing says that police are aware of gangs grooming children across the region, and that police officer numbers are continuing to rise to combat this.
The gangs have had a chance to get really deep-rooted in parts of Sheffield and across South Yorkshire. And as I say, they are mainly drug-dealing gangs, and that's where these young people are drawn in. They're looking for people who are what the police would call clean skins, not known to the police, no record. The police don't want to go around arresting young people if they can avoid it. So they're easy pickings for the gangs to use them to carry their drugs from place to place, and that's the danger.
The mantra here at Mums United is to raise awareness, nurture the young, and never give up hope. A message they are pushing now more than ever. Anna Riley, GB News, Sheffield.
Well, as people make their way to work here on this Tuesday morning, it's just getting harder to hold on to your pay packet. You see the trams that surround Manchester, and they're an area where trams really work. I remember in the mid-80s when they started digging up the city to put the tram lines down. You thought it would never happen, but there it is, and there's the new skyline of Manchester, just two of the many tower blocks that now go up, these modern residential buildings. And we were saying yesterday the population here has doubled in just 2 years. It is the place to be. It is the place to work.
You should see the raindrops every now and then going down the
place
winds.
For sunshine.
I was going to say it's almost like Dubai, but then again, maybe not.
Maybe not. Maybe not. Our rain is their sand, I suppose, is the way it is. Anyway, it's lovely being here. Thank you for your warm welcome. We're trying to reflect all things in the Northwest, and we're going to do more of that because our audience really is growing. We seem to be doing and broadcasting what you want as an alternative. So, which is quite ironic because Manchester is the home of Media City, which represents ITV and the BBC.
Yeah, but it's our heartland, and that's why we're here, and we're going to be here all week. But anyway, we're going to take a quick break. After that, we're going to be looking at today's big sports stories, and that's after your forecast.
Good morning, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. Dry and bright for many and quite mild today, but a wet day in Scotland, and there'll be some heavy snow across northern Scotland. As we've been seeing, quite a lot of cloud in the Manchester area as well today, with some drizzly rain being caused by these weather fronts. So some patchy rain over northern England, certainly, but the heaviest rain further north across Scotland and across northern Scotland, where we've got the cold air, some snow, initially over hills today, but coming down to lower levels by the end of today. There's the drizzly stuff across northern England, Northern Ireland, but most of the day dry in Northern Ireland. Later on, we'll see some rain creeping in here. For the bulk of the south, it's a fine day, dry, bright, with some spells of sunshine and quite mild as well, with temperatures up to 15, 16 Celsius in the sunshine. But look at northern Scotland, 2, 3 at best in places here, with that snow becoming more and more of a problem, initially over hills, but by the end of today coming down to lower levels and lasting for much of the night. So that could cause some disruption. Parts of Aberdeenshire up through Caithness, Sutherland in particular, some of the higher routes here could see several centimetres of snow by the time we get to Wednesday morning. Elsewhere, we'll see more rain showers moving in. Another relatively mild night across the south, but it is going to start to turn colder during tomorrow. Still, snow falling across northern Scotland. Rain showers chiefly elsewhere, but the showers for central and southern Scotland, Northern Ireland may start to turn a little more wintry by the end of Wednesday. Certainly rain in the showers zipping across England and Wales, so a different feel here tomorrow. A gusty wind blowing those showers through, meaning the sunshine won't be too far away, but also meaning it's going to feel quite a lot colder. Yes, we might get to double figures, but it'll feel colder with the strength of the winds. The outlook is for brighter skies, sunny spells and just a few wintry showers, but temperatures are tumbling as colder air returns right across the land over the next few days. Goodbye.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's 2 questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
GB News coming to you live from Manchester City Centre, our biggest growth area in terms of audience. Thank you for watching, thank you for listening, thank you for having us. Still to come on the show this morning, as travel chaos continues for people planning an Easter getaway. We're going to be live from Manchester Airport at around 7:45 to see what's happening, what's moving, and if yesterday's delays are going to carry into today. Then after that, Prince Andrew back in the papers today. But is there any truth in his so-called dodgy deals? We'll be asking our man in the know, the royal correspondent Robert Jobson, reporting on that. We want to hear from you throughout today's show. You know how to get in touch. It's gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet at GB News. But we're going to go through the back pages now. We're going to talk about the top stories. Joined by the Sun sports writer based here in Manchester, that's Ken Lawrence. Ken, good to see you.
And you.
Not such a good morning if you're an Arsenal fan. They had those games in hand. They faced Crystal Palace last night, and Palace have a wee bit of a history of upsetting the form.
Arteta has apologised for that performance last night, and he should, because Arsenal didn't step up to the plate at all. But having said that, Patrick Vieira is doing a fantastic job at Palace. There are many people now beginning to think that down the line Vieira could possibly one day even take over from Guardiola at Manchester City, because they worked there together.
Well, both of them worked, did they not? Do you know, Arteta at City and...
Arteta learned under the feet of the great man as well.
So they've been picking up parts of their trade. But you think with the resources that he's got, Vieira is showing the better promise?
Crystal Palace were always just a safe side. Now they're an impressive side. They're a developing side. Vieira is showing that he has real tactical nous, and I think he's definitely on the way to becoming a top manager, possibly a top 4 manager.
Look, it's probably a temporary setback for Arsenal. They've got games in hand. Do you see them as a top 4 finisher?
Tottenham are 4th at the moment. They've played a game more. Antonio Conte, not so long ago, was questioning whether he should even be there after some results. But he's turned it around. Harry Kane is firing again. He wasn't at the start of the season. And Arsenal have got it all to do. They should get there because of the game in hand.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't bank on it. I think Tottenham fans would be feeling very good about themselves today.
By the sound of you, you're not banking on Manchester United being in that top 4. No. And I'm referring to your paper today. The hunt for a manager goes on there, and Wayne Rooney having his say, and he's saying basically it's time to move on Cristiano Ronaldo. And I think echoing what a lot of United fans think, Pogba should go. It's time to blood the kids. How serious do you think Wayne Rooney is concerning that Man United managerial job?
I think that he might be a proposition down the line. What he's done at Derby County, given what they've been through in terms of points deductions, etc., no new players. He's lost loads of players. He's done an amazing job. Very impressive. He's proving himself, like Vieira, to be a top manager of the future.
Right. Now, amongst your views, now this has just come in from John. Welcome, Eamonn, to the beautiful sky blue city of Manchester. Thank you, John. Here's a true story. I got an invite yesterday from Manchester City to go to their match tonight. I genuinely have something else to do, luckily enough. OK, so the city is blue at the moment. City in the quarterfinals, first leg, Champions League, Liverpool in action as well, but City playing Atletico Madrid tonight at home.
They'll go through. They'll win tonight. Liverpool will beat Benfica over the 2 legs. I think Chelsea will over the 2 legs beat Real Madrid. We're going to have 3 Premier League teams
in the semis.
Yeah. For great possibility for the third time in 4 years, we're going to have 2 Premier League teams in the final. And the way things are going, they're going to start calling the Champions League final the full English.
Yeah, well, that's good. That's really good. You know, to look forward there. A few other points I want to bring up with you. We've got the Masters this weekend. Tiger Woods.
If Tiger Woods makes the cut, it's a miracle.
It's a miracle.
It's an absolute miracle.
Yeah.
He's a miraculous player anyway. He's done extraordinary things in the game. But if 14 months after he damaged himself in that car crash, if he can actually get around 2 rounds of golf and make the cut, it is one of the great miracles of sport, not just golf.
Yeah, incredible. Footballers, top footballers to be banned from gambling ads. New rules coming in.
100% agree.
Yeah. So
kids are impressionable.
Yeah. What about football pundits? I think, you know, people who present, you know, soccer programs on television, very prominent in these ads as well. Do you think the same should apply to them?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Because they're ultimately role models, and not quite the role model of, I don't know, one of the true Premier League superstars, you know, one of the younger, handsome young men, as opposed to the kind of older, more gnarly people like me. But at the same time, they have a huge effect, you know, on the young public. And yeah.
OK, so we've got Liverpool away to Benfica tonight in the Champions League quarter-final first leg, and we've got Manchester City at home to Atletico Madrid, Chelsea at home tomorrow to Real Madrid, and the other quarter-final match is Villarreal against Bayern Munich. Ken, lovely talking to you. Thank you very much.
Been a pleasure.
Thank you much. Really appreciate it. Ken Lawrence is a sports writer with The Sun. Thank you. With the time approaching 7:30, we're going to be going through the papers with Taryn Kapoor and Dominique Samuels, and they'll be doing that right after this short break. See you after this.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's 2 questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Well, here we are. We're going to go through the newspapers very shortly, but right now here are the news headlines, with the time just after 7:30.
Ukrainian forces have retaken key northern terrain, forcing Russian troops to retreat from areas around the city of Chernihiv and north of the capital Kyiv. British military intelligence says low-level fighting is likely to continue in some of the recaptured areas, but reduce this week as the remainder of the Russian forces withdraw.
The Foreign Secretary Liz Truss will meet with her Polish counterpart of Warsaw today after calling for Western allies to supply Ukraine with the weapons it needs to push back Russia. The Foreign Secretary says the UK is pulling out all the stops in a bid to ensure President Putin does not win this war.
The government has announced that it's going ahead with plans to privatise Channel 4. The Culture Secretary, Nadine Dorries, says government ownership is holding it back from competing against streaming giants like Netflix and Amazon.
Cancer survival rates in England could go into reverse due to a combination of people not seeking help for symptoms and delayed treatments. The Health and Social Care Committee says staff shortfalls are jeopardising progress on diagnosing more cancers at an early stage.
A 49-year-old British man and his 9-year-old son have been killed in a landslide whilst on holiday in Australia's Blue Mountains. 2 other members of the same family are in a critical condition. They've been rescued and taken to hospital. A 15-year-old girl hailed a hero for raising the alarm. Is also being treated for shock.
Let's go through the papers now with writer Dominique Samuels and educationalist Kapoor here with us. Very good to see you both. COVID, it hasn't gone away. A lot of people say cases are at their highest level ever. Taryn, we go to The Guardian here, and they have a list of COVID symptoms, and this list has been expanded to include another 9 signs by the NHS.
Yeah, this is really interesting in that this is about living with COVID. Basically, let's include everything. And if you're poorly, you may have COVID. In fact, a good example, one of our schools last month had 30 staff off with COVID. They hadn't tested, they were poorly, took a test, and then they had COVID. Actually, the whole of the staff could have had COVID, with about 130 children. We're just living with it.
Because we know people who have COVID and are still told to report to work.
Yeah, so the law is you don't have to isolate, but the government guidance is that you should isolate. But of course, some individuals decide to, ignore that.
Or so companies decide to ignore that as well.
Yeah, I think at this point, what symptom isn't COVID? I mean, you sneeze, it's COVID. You have a slight cough, it's COVID. You're slightly tired, it's COVID. I think it's a bit ridiculous now, especially because one of the things that is causing so many staff shortages at the moment, because it's already beginning again, is the fact that people are testing positive and then choosing to isolate because they're being advised to, not necessarily because they feel really under the weather.
They're not debilitated.
And feel too ill to go into work.
What extra symptoms should we be looking for?
I think the horse has bolted. Right. I don't think we can bring it back now and say, if you have this, you have to stay off. If people test, we give them a period of time. The problem is you don't get free lateral flow tests now, so you can't tell if the line's going fainter. So when you're feeling better, come back to work. But that's the same as any other illness.
Right.
Dominique Samuels, let's look at the newspapers. I think it's an important issue. Germany's being accused now of standing in the way of tougher European sanctions. And this whole situation in Ukraine initially did wonders in uniting the West in a way that we haven't been able to in decades. But now those cracks are beginning to show again, aren't they?
Yeah, definitely. I think President Zelensky has been particularly critical of Germany because of their reluctance to impose economic sanctions on Russia. And the principal reason for that is because Germany is probably the most reliant out of all the EU countries on Russia. I have some figures here. Russia exports 4.5 million barrels a day of oil to Europe and accounted for 70% of EU's coal imports last year. And just for Germany, in January this year, crude oil imports accounted for 39.5% of their imports, which is actually a stark increase on the same month the previous year. So Germany is increasingly more reliant on Russia, which is why they are more reluctant to actually impose these sanctions. And I think it's a bit rich for countries to start criticising Germany now when, not long ago, it was Joe Biden, the American president, that actually gave the go-ahead to Nord Stream 2, which would benefit both Germany and Russia, and that was looked upon as basically handing Putin the keys of power over Europe, yet Joe Biden still went ahead with that when his own people within his own party said that that was the wrong decision to make.
You could have looked at it that it was a bribe, an incentive to bring Putin into the fold, to normalise, to wealth-orientate Russia into thinking this Western life ain't bad.
I suppose so, but then at the same time, whilst he was approving Nord Stream 2, as soon as Joe Biden was elected, Putin then began amassing troops on the Ukrainian border. This Ukrainian issue has been going on for far longer than I think a lot of people realise. So whilst that was going on, he still approved Nord Stream 2. I think some questions have to be asked about his decision-making.
Yeah, Crimea had already been invaded and things by then. Taryn, I want to, we were talking about COVID there, and I want to go to the Express. This is page 17. And Simon Hart and Jacob Rees-Mogg say voters have moved on from Partygate. Now, we've all realised we have to live with COVID. That's now, but this was then. What's your perspective?
I'm sure they'd like to move on. That's on their agenda. I have a real difficulty with this because we're setting the moral tone. And for the people I work with, this is not acceptable. That we're saying it's OK for us to do something, but not for somebody else. A small example, which isn't about the deaths that people have had, because that's been well documented. Alcohol's a good example. We have been told in schools that you cannot even give a bottle of wine to a colleague of the week, somebody who's gone over and above.
Sorry,
because
why?
Because alcohol is not allowed in schools.
That's a bit over the top.
The next thing, it's OK to sip wine whilst you're working in Downing Street or somewhere else. Even the DFE had a party where they had alcohol, and it's a bit
Is that because, my friend, children aren't involved?
Potentially, but it's about setting an example, isn't it? If if you're working, you're working. You're not drinking. I think there's a real divide, and we should be teaching children and the whole of the nation that actually we're in a position where we can trust the government because what they're doing is morally the right thing to do. They set the rules, they should abide by the rules.
See, Taryn, very interesting argument, and I agree with you, and if you're a leader, you've got to set the tone and not do what I do what I say type thing. But as Isabel will tell you, that there is a very strong group of GBNews viewers who actually get offended when we raise the subject, as if we haven't got the right to raise the subject. What's your take on it?
I think I understand why. A lot of the commentary around Partygate, I felt personally, was manufactured outrage because, a lot of the people that were calling for harder, stricter lockdowns are now clutching their pearls because government officials didn't follow the rules they set. And I personally wasn't surprised by this because the rules themselves were completely ridiculous. I wasn't surprised that government officials secretly weren't abiding by them in private. I mean, you had Matt Hancock having affairs in his office, breaking COVID rules. And I said, I was on Good Morning Britain a few years ago, and I said they're probably doing what they want in private. So I wasn't surprised, but at the same time I do understand that if you make the rules, you have to follow them. But when we have big issues such as the cost of living, such as the Ukraine war, it does sort of feel like we're prioritising the wrong things.
If I break the rules, I lose my job.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
People would follow the same
I
rules,
do
but
agree.
It's just not acceptable.
One rule for the elites. And
so mistakes can be made. Apologise straight away. Listen, we were wrong. We'll put it right. But to cover it up and to pretend it didn't happen isn't right. I go back.
Boris Johnson last week did an interview where he said, I'm not providing a running commentary on whether I've got a fixed penalty notice or not. He has to, surely. Yeah. Did you or did you not receive a summons?
He doesn't even need to provide a running commentary. Just answer a question and just own it. Just stop lying.
But you think if he does get one, that's a resigning issue?
It's hard for me to say. It would be in my industry.
Yeah. OK. OK. Thank you.
Let's look at the front of the Mail, Dominique. Interesting story, this. It's Equalities Watchdog have been investigating the issue of trans use of female loos, and what's the decision been?
Right, just explain that to us all, because a lot of us can't follow that. So these would be shared cubicles. for instance. Am I right?
All right.
What?
Okay, so new guidance has been released from the Equality and Human Rights Commission, and this guidance stipulates that trans women can be excluded from female-only changing rooms and bathrooms, and also it highlights things like women's rape refuges and also female-only spaces in institutions such as the NHS.
So this doesn't matter if this person identifies as a female, if they've got male genitalia, they can legally now be excluded from such areas.
Yes, and this could be for religious reasons, for women that need female-only spaces for religious reasons. I know that for Muslim women, for example, when they are in the bathroom, they need to adjust the hijab or whatever. Having a biological male there just wouldn't be right. Also,
what's your view as a woman?
My view as a woman is, you only need to look at the statistics when it comes to unisex spaces. Cases of sexual assault in unisex spaces are always higher than single-sex spaces, and I don't think this is necessarily about trans people specifically when it comes to female-only spaces, because in gender-neutral bathrooms and such, they're going to be frequented the vast majority of the time by biological men, not actually transgender people, which heightens the risk for women. I don't think this should necessarily just be about trans people. It should be about the safety of women.
But is it essentially saying that trans people are not women? And that's where you get into this very murky area. And what position are those trans people then in if they're excluded from a space to which they identify?
I just think we need to accept the reality here, and it's that the vast majority of people that identify as trans are biological men who actually retain their male genitalia, so they have, what males have. That is not something that women or females have, and I think a lot of trans people would generally accept that and be open to, accepting, I have male genitalia, I might not necessarily look like a woman, although I identify as one, so other biological women will be and feel uncomfortable, and I think that should be respected.
So how do we take that forward to our working environment, where one of the big surprises for Isabel and I was that we had to share loos. So we had, are these called what, gender neutral loos?
We've got gender neutral loos
so
at GBNews of all places.
Basically, she's very ladylike, I'm very gentlemanly. I don't really want to listen to her in the next cubicle beside me or whatever. I mean,
powdering my nose.
Powdering your nose or whatever, you know it is. But do we take this now that these are a bad idea?
Well, it's not safe for you to be in the loo with me, apparently.
Well, I personally don't like them.
I don't like them. I don't like them, especially on a night out when you do actually want to powder your nose.
Like at you
and they're all a bit tipsy.
Yeah,
no.
It's not good.
I don't like that.
No,
but,
we don't like that as an idea.
No, but this is a difficult issue that the Daily Mail have talked about, and it's a brave man or woman that tackles this subject. It's open to lots of strong feelings, and Labour have been getting into lots of hot water and being asked these questions. We've got Lucy Powell on this morning. Perhaps we'll ask her views on it.
What about a word about the travelling chaos? Does it put you off travelling over Easter, or what's the situation? This is front page of the Daily Star.
This has made my wife really stressful.
Right.
We're away on Friday.
Right.
It's a perfect storm, isn't it? The airports have laid off significant numbers of people. They've got jobs elsewhere because there are jobs in the market. We're in a position now where they're trying to bring them back. There's a massive increase in demand. And the taxi driver who brought me in today said, I've just been to Manchester Airport. They're queuing outside the building. And it is stressful for people. I actually said, we need to have our Kindles and just accept we're going to be there for 3 hours. And that's a mindset we're not used to, because people do get stressed, and you can understand why it's putting people off travelling, especially the elderly.
We were saying that, weren't we?
Yeah.
We were just saying, I've got no desire to hop on a plane until all of these sort of problems are sorted out.
I'll be happy when I get there.
Yeah, well, you might be. This story on the front of the Star was saying they were running out of loo roll in Spain, and everyone wanted to come home. Get me out of there, it was saying. So I don't know what's going on.
Okay. Guys, really appreciate it. Thank you very much indeed. Taryn and Dominique will be back in 45 minutes' time with more from the papers. Right now, let's bring you up to date with the news you're waking up to.
The Ukrainian forces have retaken key northern terrain, forcing Russian troops to retreat from areas around the city of Chernihiv and north of the capital Kyiv. British military intelligence says low-level fighting is likely to continue in some of the recaptured areas, but will reduce this week as the remainder of the Russian forces withdraw.
Labour is warning that poorly insulated rural homes face higher energy bills than those in urban areas. The party says reliance on oil and a lack of energy-efficient properties is down to 12 years of Conservative failure. We'll be asking the Shadow Culture Secretary Lucy Powell for her thoughts shortly.
And members of the EastEnders cast have paid tribute to the actress June Brown after she died at the age of 95. Actor and musician Martin Kemp has called her a huge inspiration, and Daniela Westbrook said her heart was broken. June Brown's 35-year run in Albert Square began in 1985 before she left the show in 2020. Okay, we were just talking about travel chaos during the Easter holidays, and passengers looking to go abroad this Easter have been facing disruption because of airlines cancelling flights and the Eurotunnel warning of 3-hour delays.
Well, let's go to Manchester Airport. Today they had flight cancellations, big delays yesterday. Let's see what it's looking like today. Terminal 1. Manchester, Bradley Harris, the man there for us, checking us in as to what all looks quiet. Bradley.
Yeah, I've just been inside Terminal 1 check-in hall, and it may look quiet outside this terminal building, but when you go inside, that's where you really start to see the chaos unfolding. There are hundreds of people queuing up just to get into security. I'm talking hundreds of people queuing up all the way through the terminal building, right outside to the taxi rank where people are dropping off their family, their friends to go on holiday, because many people, of course, will be going abroad for the first time for their Easter holidays since COVID restrictions for international travel were dropped. And at the moment, Manchester Airport don't have enough staff to deal with this sudden influx of passengers. It's to do with COVID sickness. It's also to do with the amount of staff that were laid off during the pandemic, because, of course, profits weren't where they should have been during that time. So now Manchester Airport are trying to recruit more staff to help deal with the flow of passengers coming through. Airlines have already been facing disruption too, with COVID sickness and members of staff there. We know that EasyJet have been cancelling flights. Today, it's expected 60 flights for EasyJet will be cancelled to and from the UK. Yesterday, it was 62, and on the weekend, it was 222. British Airways, a similar picture, really. Yesterday, they had 115 flights cancelled. Yet to be confirmed how many will be cancelled today. Of course, inside Manchester Airport, it's not just there. Heathrow is seeing some disruption as well. But I've been chatting to some travel agents. Richard Slater in Macclesfield, he has a travel agent there. He's been telling me that customers have been coming up to him and saying, look, I want to fly from Liverpool Airport instead to avoid disruption, because certainly people have been waiting for hours to try and board flights here at Manchester Airport. One woman hadn't seen her family since the pandemic began, was going to go away to go and see her relatives for the first time in a long time, was waiting 3 hours for their flight because of the lack of staff here, ended up missing the flight even though she waited 3 hours. So at the moment, people are turning up expecting to go abroad, but when they get in there, that's when they'll start to see long wait times, really long wait times, people queuing up for a considerable amount of time. Now, Manchester Airport have apologised, and they have said that they aim to provide a better service than this, but we'll have to see what happens in the coming days. Certainly at the moment, it is chaos inside the terminal building.
OK, Bradley, thank you. Now, the photographer attending the Duke of Edinburgh's memorial service has revealed he was told not to photograph Prince Andrew, who accompanied the Queen at Westminster Abbey last week. It comes as the Duke of York gets set to join Her Majesty at the Epsom races during the Jubilee celebrations this summer. Well, royal author and commentator Robert Jobson joins us now. Very good morning to you, Robert. First of all, let's just get your reaction to this news that the camera, the photographer that was given access to this memorial broke with protocol, and just explain how difficult and privileged it is to be nominated as the only photographer in there, and what the advice from the palace was, and how significant it is that he broke those rules.
Well, I was sitting only a few yards away from him when he was there. He was chaperoned by the press advisor, the press team from the palace. He was on, he was on the royal rota, so he's sort of under their jurisdiction to a degree. But of course, the bottom line was that morning we broke the story on GBNews that Andrew was going to accompany the Queen to the event. Of course, that then became the story, and so quite rightly, as a news photographer, he decided he was going to take that picture. But it's difficult because you're there under their auspices. But if you don't get that picture, I'm sure all the editors and picture editors in Fleet Street would have been asking what on earth he was doing.
But will he be struck off then from ever being able to get on that royal pool again?
I think if that happens, there'll be uproar. I think that the palace got it completely wrong from beginning to end on this. The reality is the photographer's there to report the news as other reporters. You can't be controlled by the palace. During the pandemic, there's been far too much control of this royal rota and what can be embargoed, what can't be embargoed. And frankly, they've utilised it to sort of almost stage manage what they want in the papers and what they don't. I don't think you could continue to do this. I mean, I can understand it when there were restrictions in the pandemic. I can understand all that, but I can't understand them trying to completely organise the agenda to suit themselves. There was a story there, and the newspapers and the news photographers and reporters are there to report the story, not the image that the palace want. I mean, ultimately, there have been photographs, once we've broken the story on GBNews, that of them actually in the car. So what happened after that? Did he just disappear?
Yeah, no, really fair point. Look, given the controversy surrounding Prince Andrew, at that time we were just talking about the out-of-court settlement he made, paying tens of millions of pounds to a girl he claims to have no recollection of. But since these pictures that we're looking at now, more question marks have risen about his judgment. This time, financial dealings that he's made, more coverage in the papers today. What's the latest twist on that?
Well, I mean, he's been embroiled in a court case that effectively is between two other people, a Turkish billionaire and a complaint about the handling of money. And money was apparently paid to him, to Sarah, and to one of his daughters. Now, the reality is that was, again, calls into question his private office as well as his judgment as to why on earth they accepted this money in the first place. It has been returned and no wrongdoing has been recorded. But the fact is, it brings into question the people around him as well as himself and his judgment. The other thing that happened, of course, is he posted this message on Sarah Ferguson's Instagram all about his heroics in the Falklands War, which is 40 years ago, and he was fought very courageously in that conflict. But the fact is, you wonder why he's doing it now. I think at the moment he's a bit all over the place, Andrew, and I think probably it's best if he just lays low and tries to rebuild his life in a quiet place. Because at the moment, Fleet Street are very unforgiving, and the public simply don't want to know. And I think he's misjudging the public mood about him.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, you say he's misjudging the public mood. He put that Instagram post up on his ex-wife's account and then removed it. So perhaps he got a sense then of how badly it was being received. Reportedly, he wants to accompany the Queen to some of the Jubilee celebrations, perhaps the Derby at Epsom. Do you think that's likely to happen? And if so, given what happened last week, how well will that be received by the public?
Well, Isabel, I think they've got it this slightly the wrong way round. It's not so much Andrew pushing himself forward. I really don't believe that is the case. He was quite happy to go to the Thanksgiving service with his daughters, and there's been quite heavy briefing against him. My understanding was the Queen wanted him to do that rather than the other way around. And equally, if there's a family situation, not a state or public situation in terms of an official engagement, that the Queen wants him at her side, she will simply ask him to do it. And if she's asking you to do it, I think it's pretty impossible for Andrew to say no. Now, whether or not the Prince of Wales and the Duke of Cambridge are against this, we'll have to wait. We understand that is the case because they probably feel it's the wrong image and the wrong message. But ultimately, the Queen is at the moment the Queen, and it's her decision if she wants him to accompany her to a private or a family event.
And it is her party after all. OK, Robert Jobson, thank you very much. Always good to have you on the programme. See you soon. Look, stay with us. In a moment, we'll be speaking to a former Tory minister who's called Brooks Newmark. He's preparing to take in a family of Ukrainian refugees next week.
Yeah. And as you can see here in Manchester, a bit of a cloudy, overcast day. You're seeing the Science and Industry Museum there, a view from outside the building that we are in. That sums up what you need to know about the weather in Manchester today. For the rest of the country, here's your forecast.
Good morning, Alex Deakin here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. Dry and bright for many and quite mild today, but a wet day in Scotland, and there'll be some heavy snow across northern Scotland. As we've been seeing, quite a lot of cloud in the Manchester area as well today, with some drizzly rain being caused by these weather fronts. So some patchy rain over northern England, certainly, but the heaviest rain further north across Scotland and across northern Scotland, where we've got the cold air, some snow, initially over hills today, but coming down to lower levels by the end of today. There's the drizzly stuff across northern England, Northern Ireland, but most of the day dry in Northern Ireland. Later on, we'll see some rain creeping in here. For the bulk of the south, it's a fine day, dry, bright, with some spells of sunshine and quite mild as well, with temperatures up to 15, 16 Celsius in the sunshine. But look at northern Scotland, 2, 3 at best in places here, with that snow becoming more and more of a problem, initially over hills, but by the end of today coming down to lower levels and lasting for much of the night. So that could cause some disruption. Parts of Aberdeenshire up through Caithness, Sutherland in particular, some of the higher routes here could see several centimetres of snow by the time we get to Wednesday morning. Elsewhere, we'll see more rain showers moving in. Another relatively mild night across the south, but it is going to start to turn colder during tomorrow. Still, snow falling across northern Scotland. Rain showers chiefly elsewhere, but the showers for central and southern Scotland, Northern Ireland may start to turn a little more wintry by the end of Wednesday. Certainly rain in the showers zipping across England and Wales, so a different feel here tomorrow. A gusty wind blowing those showers through, meaning the sunshine won't be too far away, but also meaning it's going to feel quite a lot colder. Yes, we might get to double figures, but it'll feel colder with the strength of the winds. The outlook is for brighter skies, sunny spells and just a few wintry showers, but temperatures are tumbling as colder air returns right across the land over the next few days. Goodbye.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's 2 questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Britain calls for maximum sanctions against Russia as President Joe Biden demands President Putin stands trial for war crimes.
Good morning. It's 8 o'clock on Tuesday, the 5th of April. This is Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn and Isabel, live from Manchester.
Leading the news this morning, the Foreign Secretary, Liz Truss, has demanded tougher sanctions against Russia, including a deadline for ending Western use of Russian oil and gas.
Speaking alongside Ukraine's Foreign Minister, she condemned the butchery seen in Bucha.
It comes as President Joe Biden calls for Putin to be tried as a war criminal.
Also today, Channel 4 is to be privatised as the Culture Secretary, Nadine Dorries, backs proposals to sell off the broadcaster after 40 years of public ownership.
As you're probably aware, we're live from Manchester all of this week. We want you to get in touch. We're reflecting your views, bringing the news programme to you and you letting us know what makes the news for you. Tell us about your city. GBViews at gbnews.uk or tweet at GBNews. Our top story today, Liz Truss has demanded that sanctions against Russia have to be stepped up to the maximum as atrocities are revealed in liberated areas of Kyiv.
Well, in a news conference with Ukraine's Foreign Minister, she called for a timetable to end the West's use of Russian oil and gas and stated there should be no talk of removing sanctions while Putin's troops are in Ukraine.
It comes after evidence of civilian executions. There's also mass graves in the recently liberated Bucha.
President Zelensky made an impassioned plea yesterday for a stronger international response, warning that new sanctions would not be enough. He added that the civilian death toll could be higher in other areas yet to be liberated.
Meanwhile, in America, the president has responded by calling for Vladimir Putin to be tried for war crimes and vowing to supply more weapons to the Ukrainian government.
Well, let's now speak to Brooks Newmark. He's a former Conservative Minister for Civil Society, and he joins us now. Very good morning to you, Brooks. I believe you're in Poland this morning. Just tell us a little bit, good morning, just tell us a little bit about what you're doing there, first of all.
Sure. I think about the third day of the war. I noticed a Latvian friend of mine who has a logistics company was trying to organize to move people from the Polish border, where they were in these sort of large warehouses sleeping on beds, to Berlin, to Paris, to Luxembourg, and to Riga. So I sort of sent him a message and said, I'm going to come and join you. I came out here and we started working. And then we noticed that there was a bottleneck building up around Lviv. And so we then got 2 buses into Ukraine and started moving people from Lviv. And then we expanded from there and then went further to the east to Venetia. And so far, I think in the past 3.5, 4 weeks, we've managed to move about 6,383 women and children to safety, including 70 orphans.
It's one thing, Brooks, you know, taking refugees from Poland or Hungary or some bordering country on Ukraine, but you're heading deep into Ukraine. We hear that you're also going to go further in, maybe to Kharkiv. Isn't that just too dangerous, surely, in a war zone?
Well, let's be clear. At this stage, this is what I've been doing here in Warsaw, is that I've got a friend of mine who, and we're working with the government in Kiev to make sure that whatever roads that we use to transport people are safe. You know, the most important thing is that we don't want to take people effectively from the frying pan to the fire. And we've heard already some horrendous stories where Russian soldiers have indiscriminately shot women and children in cars trying to escape. So I think the most important thing is that if we're going to do something, that it must be done securely. So that's really at this stage what my focus is. Once we know we have a secure route, we then have now, I've got 3 buses, we're trying to get 3 more buses, because while at the moment the train service is working fairly well from Lviv and from Kiev, moving to the Polish border, where people really are stuck are those who've escaped from Mariupol, have moved a little further to the west, are in small towns, but can't get out from there. So I'm trying to figure out a way, how do we do that, but how do we do that safely? So that's been my priority at the moment.
What you're doing is so amazing. So many people sit and watch the news and want to help, and you're putting into practice exactly what you preach, and many will admire you for it. I just want to get your opinion because, of course, you also were a minister in a previous life, and I just wondered what you think of the way the UK government have been handling this crisis, and specifically in the last 24 hours we've heard from our Foreign Secretary, Liz Truss, and she's been saying that she wants to see maximum sanctions being imposed, and she's trying to urge members of the G7 to try and stop that dependence on Russian gas and oil that is, of course, funding the Russian war machine. I mean, are these words, are we doing enough?
Well, I think Liz Truss is absolutely right, and I think the problem is that as the war goes on, energy prices go up, and we're all feeding the monster by continuing to buy energy from Russia. Now, the bigger problem is that notwithstanding the sanctions, if you look at energy consumption, which is being exported from Russia, it has not changed a bit. I mean, literally not a dime. So Putin is still getting the money to fund his war machine. I think my bigger criticism really goes to the likes of India that have are now taking on the energy that maybe we may not be taking on, or China. And I think that if we have sanctions, it's got to be globally. We can't just simply be virtue signaling in the West by saying we're not going to do something if it's actually having no impact. And at the moment, it's not really having an impact. It's got to be a global effort, and we've got to work really through the UN as well to try and make this happen.
Well, really fascinating to get your perspective. Really appreciate, Brooks Newmark, you taking the time to talk to us this morning, and we wish you the best of luck with hosting Ukrainian refugees in your own home as well. I understand that's something you've committed to do.
If I could have one last message to the Home Secretary.
Yeah.
Can I have one last message? I managed the daughter who applied got her visa last week, but the mother still hasn't got her visa. So they're still stuck in the middle of Ukraine, trying to get out. So I'm going to implore my MP, who happens to be the Home Secretary, to try and see if we can get the other visa so both mother and daughter can be with us for Easter.
Keep us posted on that progress. Really interesting to talk to you. Thank you, Brooks Newmark.
So, here we are broadcasting live from Manchester all this week, and before the pandemic, Manchester was listed as one of the UK's top buy-to-let investment locations. It boasts great return on what could be relatively cheaper properties compared to other parts of England, I mean particularly London. But how easy is it to invest here now, and the whole transformation? Fascinating man joins me now. He's a property developer and he's a founder of a company called Urban Splash. He is Tom Bloxham. Good to see you, Tom. And 30 years ago, right, you started Urban Splash 30 years ago. This was a very different skyline. This was a very different place. What was your ambition? What were you trying to do? And did you think it would end up looking the way it does now?
That's a great question, Eamonn. I mean, it's amazing being up here and seeing the city that we see today. But I first came to Manchester actually 40 years ago as a young student. And it was a very different city. And it was really a city of almost dark satanic mills. Less than 200 people lived in the city centre. You could not buy a loaf of bread or a pint of milk. The shutters came down at 6 o'clock at night. And it was really quite an uninhabitable place. Urban at that stage was a dirty word. Urban decay, urban deprivation, urban task force. But what we saw, initially as a student, and I was into business selling posters and running bars, is this amazing stock of Victorian buildings that nobody wanted to live in or work in. And so bit by bit, we started buying them very, very cheaply at the time and transforming them and bringing people back to work in the city centre, to live in the city centre, creating loft apartments, creating new areas of Manchester like Castlefield, where we are here, the Northern Quarter, New Islington and Coates, and really seeing the city come into its own with a great university, great cultural institutions, and seeing the city become what it is today.
You had a vision, you had a social vision as well. I mean, it would be too simplistic to say you're a property developer. I mean, there was a whole social conscience to all of this. And to people today, I mean, you know, sometimes people say, be careful what you wish for. Fantastic dream that you had. But there would be people today that would say, what about the gentrification? How do you afford to live in a city like this?
Yeah, I mean, I think gentrification is a difficult term. There are very few people living in the city centres. It wasn't about displacing people, it's about bringing new people back in. And where we've worked in communities like New Islington, we've been very careful to make sure that each of the existing residents get a right to a brand new house on the same terms.
Yeah.
What I think is very true is you come to the city centre here and it's amazing, but you look all the way around here and a mile away you've got this sort of donut of some really quite tough neighbourhoods, and where the wealth of the city centre hasn't really reached out to those neighbourhoods, and there's still lots of work to be done.
I wanted to ask you about that because, you know, the old sort of expression, build it and they will come, and you seeing Manchester change, particularly in the last 20 years, presumably has brought with it, attracted lots of people to come and do jobs here, to innovate, the universities have expanded, all of that brings wealth to the city. But does that also, as you say, and sort of hint at, price out some of the people who live? We talked yesterday, didn't we, to somebody who was near to Media City who just couldn't simply afford to live where he grew up because media types like us came in and bought the houses that they used to live in. So is it a bit of a dual-edged thing?
There is, you know, an affordability. If you're lucky enough to own your own house, everyone talks at dinner parties about how much the house has gone up and you'll be very pleased about it. If you can't get on the housing ladder, it's very, very tough. I mean, what I would say is Manchester is so much more affordable than London or most of the South East. Outside the city centre, you can still buy houses for less than £100,000, so it is all relative. I mean, we are working very, very hard to try to make our houses more and more affordable and to try to make them affordable for more and more people, so more and more people can live in real quality accommodation.
But you use lots of areas that are underused, not used or dilapidated. You saw this gap in the market, and I mean, it's good use. I mean, environmentally it's good use, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, that gap, first of all, was actually the very city centre. You know, where we're stood here was a two-storey shed, and actually started off underused, disused Victoria Mills. The property industry said they'd never let. But we saw a whole bunch of new age entrepreneurs coming up, people who were making records, doing fashion, doing design, architects who wanted space and wanted flexible space and wanted a property company to rent them space on flexible terms. Couldn't necessarily commit to a 25-year lease that the rest of the property company was. And then more recently we've gone on to the areas on the edge of the city centre, areas that were previously industrial estates, and we're now working both in Manchester and across the country, in Birmingham, in Bristol, in Plymouth, in Sheffield.
Seeing if you can replicate the same plan.
Similar plan. I mean, everywhere is different, everywhere is special, and for us it's about thinking about what's special about this place, what's special about that place.
You are a special man. I know of you, I know about you, I know what you've done, I know about your visions. You bring a charisma, you bring a showbiz touch, you bring an artistic touch to things that you do as well. We've still got a housing crisis here, so we're talking about what you've done, what you've achieved. What's there still to do?
Well, I mean, there's loads more still to do. And we talked about Manchester. There's still people living in really crap houses. And I think more importantly, when you look at the massive, even expensive new build houses, for me it's quite depressing. The houses that we're building in the mass housing estates give nothing back to the street. They're car friendly. And actually we want to create new places that are green spaces, that favour pedestrians rather to cars. What we're also working with is building houses in factories using modern methods of construction. And the problem with the house building industry is they've got more and more expensive and actually smaller and smaller and arguably no better. Whereas if you look at your televisions or anything else in life, you know, the new television you buy is half the price of the last one. It's twice as good, it's twice as big. So why can't we do that with housing? And we believe by building houses using modern methods in factories, using high-tech precision engineering, we can actually start to increase the quality and reduce the cost of housing.
Well, that's exciting. I hope it's contagious to the authorities. What, you know, I mean, do you get that cooperation? Do people see, are you able to work together with local authorities on all of this one? Is planning permission easy to come by?
Like anything else, in some authorities yes, in some authorities no. Whenever you try to do anything new and different, it's always harder than just repeating what you've done before. You know, the problem with the property industry, it is a very backward looking, it always looks to the past. You want your house valued and they see what the one next door sold for last year rather than looking forward. You know, and for us, the companies we love are companies like Tesla and Apple, and actually it's, you know, other companies and other sectors that we think you've got to look to the future. I remember when I was 9, I saw Neil Armstrong land on the moon. I saw Concorde fly. I saw hovercraft fly. In our time there, everything was changing for the better. And all of a sudden, we seem to have gone in a bit of a reactionary time. And I want to make houses better, make them more affordable, use different processes, and just see, can we make more and more homes affordable to more and more people?
Well, good luck to you. Can't argue with that, Tom Bloxham. He's a very special man, very special company. Urban Splash is what it calls, and he is responsible for a lot of the changes, a lot of the development in Manchester, and a different way of looking at things. Lovely to talk to you, Tom.
Thank you both.
Thank you very much.
Still to come on the show, he's the travel presenter turned MasterChef star. His name's Eamonn Latif, and he joins us in the studio after the forecast.
Good morning, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. Dry and bright for many and quite mild today, but a wet day in Scotland, and there'll be some heavy snow across northern Scotland. As we've been seeing, quite a lot of cloud in the Manchester area as well today, with some drizzly rain being caused by these weather fronts. So some patchy rain over northern England, certainly, but the heaviest rain further north across Scotland and across northern Scotland, where we've got the cold air, some snow, initially over hills today, but coming down to lower levels by the end of today. There's the drizzly stuff across northern England, Northern Ireland, but most of the day dry in Northern Ireland. Later on, we'll see some rain creeping in here. For the bulk of the south, it's a fine day, dry, bright, with some spells of sunshine and quite mild as well, with temperatures up to 15, 16 Celsius in the sunshine. But look at northern Scotland, 2, 3 at best in places here, with that snow becoming more and more of a problem, initially over hills, but by the end of today coming down to lower levels and lasting for much of the night. So that could cause some disruption. Parts of Aberdeenshire up through Caithness, Sutherland in particular, some of the higher routes here could see several centimetres of snow by the time we get to Wednesday morning. Elsewhere, we'll see more rain showers moving in. Another relatively mild night across the south, but it is going to start to turn colder during tomorrow. Still, snow falling across northern Scotland. Rain showers chiefly elsewhere, but the showers for central and southern Scotland, Northern Ireland may start to turn a little more wintry by the end of Wednesday. Certainly rain in the showers zipping across England and Wales, so a different feel here tomorrow. A gusty wind blowing those showers through, meaning the sunshine won't be too far away, but also meaning it's going to feel quite a lot colder. Yes, we might get to double figures, but it'll feel colder with the strength of the winds. The outlook is for brighter skies, sunny spells and just a few wintry showers, but temperatures are tumbling as colder air returns right across the land over the next few days. Goodbye.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's 2 questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
it's 8:20. Still to come on today's show, he's the Man U star turned national hero. We'll chat to Marcus Rashford's former football coach about how it all began.
And coming up just before 9 o'clock, we're going to be asking the Shadow Culture Secretary, Lucy Powell, about the cost of living and what she thinks about selling off Channel 4, which is what the government plans to do.
Yeah.
I can't see how it makes a darn bit of difference to anybody
No,
as to who owns Channel 4.
Yeah.
But anyway, they all want to argue about it. People didn't even know that Channel 4, they say it's in government hands, but it's not in government hands.
Well,
10%.
it's publicly ownership, but 90% funded by adverts, so about
Yes, it's
10%. Yeah, hardly anything. Let us know what you think about that and the rest of the issues that we're talking about this morning. Get in touch the usual way, GBViews at gbnews.uk, or you can use Twitter at GBNews.
21 minutes past 8 o'clock. Let's bring you up to date on the news front. The Foreign Secretary says being tough is the only approach that will work against Russia. Liz Truss said she's demanding tougher sanctions and more weapons for Ukraine. This is ahead of a meeting with her Polish counterpart, which will take place today in Warsaw.
We were speaking about it a moment ago. Channel 4 has said it is disappointed at the government's decision to privatise the broadcaster. No price tag's been set just yet, but reports suggest the channel could be sold for as much as £1 billion.
And the EastEnders cast have paid tribute to the actress June Brown after she passed away at the age of 95. Letitia Dean, you'll know her best as Sharon Watts, described her as a phenomenal actress, whilst Patsy Palmer, who played Bianca, said, "I honestly thought you would be here forever, June." June Brown played Dot Cotton for 35 years, from 1985 to 2020.
Now, he's an entrepreneur, a motivational speaker and a world traveller. So is there anything that Amr Latif can't do?
I would guess not. He's now turning his attention to the kitchen because he was the first ever blind contestant to appear on Celebrity MasterChef 2 years ago, and he's launched a series of videos showcasing top cooking hacks, which can be a little bit difficult, Amar, if you're blind, as you are.
Well, it's funny you should say that, Eamonn. I always think that because I'm blind, you know, I can't see my knives, can't see my fingers, so I can't see any problems. It's sometimes easier when you're
problems,
blind.
Well, it hasn't held you back in the kitchen, that's for sure. You made it to the semi-finals, didn't you, of MasterChef? And people were just amazed by what what you were able to do.
I did. I mean, it was. I surprised myself because when the bosses of BBC came to me in 2019, I panicked and I said, "Look, I'm blind and I can't cook." And they went, "Oh well," and left me alone. And then they came back to me in 2020 and I said, "Guys, I'm still blind and I still can't cook."
Yeah.
But this time they insisted, and you know, you just had to put my dedication to it. And I just started to notice that actually there's ways of doing things that are actually really cool, whether you're blind or not. And you know, in terms of like making the rice. Like everybody kept messing up their rice, but I've got a little secret hack for that.
So what is the secret hack for that?
Well, you know, like when you're simmering rice, you know, sometimes some rice might take 10 minutes or 14 minutes, whatever that time is. Sighted people are so tempted to lift that lid to see what it's doing. I'd say, do not lift that lid. Leave that lid on. And then after your 11 minutes is over, providing you put the right amount of water in, you will get the beautiful rice, and stick in a few cardamom pods. They make it taste so fragrant.
You see, you make all that sound very appetising, very enthusiastic about it all, but yet most of us would rely, we rely on our touch, we rely on our sense of smell, but we rely a lot on our sight to judge whether that rice would be cooked or not. So you've brushed up on your cooking skills. You used to be rubbish. How would you relate yourself now?
Well, now I'm quite comfortable. Like if both you guys said, like, "Amr, we want to come round to your house for dinner," I'd be like, "Cool." You know, I've got certain recipes up my sleeve. And before I went on MasterChef, I didn't know that sighted people obsessed about how things looked on the plate, because for you guys, if it doesn't look good on the plate, naturally you don't like the taste of it, you know. And I learned how to present things well, so yeah, I'm pretty confident.
Oh, well done you. And have you ever had any moments in the kitchen where you've thought, right, I'm not doing this anymore, this is too risky, you know, nearly chopped a finger off or something like that? Because we've all done that, haven't we?
Yeah.
As sighted people.
It can be a dangerous place, that kitchen.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, I had a few accidents in the kitchen, you know, not immune to them. But I've got asbestos fingers, you know, like I can dip them into oil sometimes and pull them out quickly just to see how things are. But I wouldn't recommend it. But yeah, I'm quite comfortable with it. I mean, these days I'm quite busy, so, you know, it's always a challenge in really cooking.
What you're trying to do is to make visually impaired people more comfortable in that kitchen, right? So you have a number of hacks, a number of pieces of advice for them.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I've been working with the Guide Dogs for the Blind, who are this incredible charity, and we've been putting together some hack videos on there. So, for example, when you're working with knives, like whether you're blind or sighted, we all want to keep our fingers safe. So I'd always say tuck your fingers back so that the knuckles hit the flat of the knife. And as a blind person, if I've got the added luxury, you don't need to look down at what you're doing. You can just relax and just focus on what you're doing. And you know, that's amazing. And I've got loads of little hacks. But in the kitchen, like when I'm cooking my chicken, to know when my chicken's ready, when you squeeze it between your fingers, it just crumbles. The onions talk to me, like, you know, from nice sizzle sound, they go to crackling when they need moving around, you know. So I'd say to anybody out there, like, use your other senses, try and use them. I know you focus on the sight, but try listening to your food, you know, try touching it, and you'll just probably improve your cooking.
God, you sound like Nigella Lawson now, so you do.
No, do I?
Yes.
I'm not as good looking as her, though.
A lot of people have lost their sense of smell in the last couple of years with COVID doing the rounds. How bad is that for somebody like you who relies on your other senses so much? Because, I mean, I lost my sense of smell for a year, pretty much, after my first having had COVID. And I found it awful, but I still have my sight. What's it been like for you?
I mean, yeah, I got the old COVID as well at one point, and losing my smell was, like, really tough. You know, things like that are so tough, especially when you rely on it so much, you know. But in saying that, like, people say to me the worst thing that they would ever not want to lose is their sight. And I just think being blind is cool, because, like, you can still talk to people and you can still touch and taste and stuff, and I actually don't mind being blind, you know.
But Amar, you are exceptional. You know, anytime I've spoken to you before, he just exudes this happiness from within, and you know, that is an amazing gift in itself, because it's contagious.
Well, thank you. Well, you know, it wasn't always like that, but, you know, when I lost my sight, you know, you suddenly, it puts everything into perspective. You realise we only have one life. So whether you've lost your sight or you've got any challenge in life, you know, we're not here forever, so you might as well make the most of it.
How old were you when you lost your sight?
I was 18. I remember waking up and I couldn't see the poster at the end of my bed, and I knew I was going to be going blind, and I realised that this was it, you know, that I was now blind, and I thought, I don't want to be blind, you know, I just wanted to go back to bed and wake up and be my normal self, but the reality was that my life had changed.
But you have a bank of visual memories, I suppose, you can call upon, and when you're in the kitchen, I mean, unlike a lot of people, you know what a kitchen looks like, and you know what certain foods are like, and...
Absolutely, like, you know, and I know what I look like I'm a young version in my head. I'm not going old.
Yeah, you don't have to watch that painful process. There you go, major advantage. Well, look, people are familiar with white sticks, with guide dogs being really useful tools for people who haven't got their sight, but now they can call on your amazing series of videos and get lots of tips from you on how to overcome all those challenges that people face in the kitchen. So, well done you. Really amazing to speak to you and meet you and hear all the things you've achieved.
Thank you so much. Really lovely chatting to you both.
And keep smiling, my friend.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you very much, Steve. He reminds me of me. Always happen. Do you not
You
talk to him?
are unbelievable.
Do you not, like the crew were just saying to me?
It's the cooking skills, for sure.
It's even the side that I just bring sunshine.
Positivity.
Just wherever you go. Like, and the viewers are watching there, and the listeners, and they just feel the sunshine coming through the rays.
Yeah.
I'm just saying to you because you could do worse
Oh,
than
here we
copy.
go.
Just copy
Unbelievable.
both of us.
I think we should just take the break. And
Very good.
Yeah, we'll be back in a minute with the papers. See you then.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Very good to see you again. You're watching GB Breakfast with Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel Webster, live all this week from Manchester.
Time to bring you up to date on this morning's headlines. Liz Truss says being tough is the only approach that will work against Russia. The Foreign Secretary is demanding tougher sanctions and more weapons for Ukraine ahead of a meeting with her Polish counterpart in Warsaw.
Cancer survival in England could go into reverse due to a combination of people not seeking help for symptoms and delayed treatments during the pandemic. The Health and Social Care Committee says staff shortfalls are jeopardising progress on diagnosing more cancers at an early stage.
Channel 4 has said it's disappointed at the government's decision to privatise the broadcaster. No price tag has been set yet, but reports suggest the channel could be sold for as much as £1 billion. Okay, it's time.
So my first point to the newspaper reviewers, Taryn and Dominique, who've been with us all morning, is who cares who owns Channel 4?
I do. I do.
Well, why? So the government owns 10% of it.
No, I don't mind that. I just think it's a shame if we're just going to put it up for sale and swoops a foreign investor. That would be. I think
but they've only got 10% to get rid of.
Well, I know. What exactly? What's Nadine Dorries up to? Is what you're saying? Like,
no,
why is she selling it?
I'm saying why you're getting your knickers in a twist.
Well, because all the stuff we were talking about an hour ago, which is about all the British programmes that will probably be lost if an American investor comes in and decides let's just do wall-to-wall. You know, American sitcoms or whatever it might be. We lose those things like Grand Designs or Great British Bake Off or whatever it might be.
You see, they're all, in that American idea, they're franchises, they're formats. So there's nothing, you're not missing individual programming. These are series which will all work, won't they? They'll all
Or you
work.
think that the Americans would just buy them up, perhaps? Yeah, who knows?
Yeah.
But it's a debate to be had. Anyway,
do you care, Taryn? Do you care?
Not really.
No.
I think it's so complex and
they don't transmit any football, so what's the point of them?
I won't watch it.
It is so complex, you're saying. But anyway, we've got the Shadow Culture Secretary, haven't we, on this one?
Yeah.
I think just after.
Just before 9. Just before 9, yeah.
Okay. So, what have we got now paper-wise? Who would we get?
Dominique, let's go to the eye. Ukraine is desperate for more military equipment as the war escalates. Now, it's interesting because obviously we're seeing the demilitarisation of these towns in the Kyiv region, but we are expecting to see further progress from Russia in eastern parts of the country. And I was reading about the so-called Dad's Army as well, where 130,000 new conscripts have been recruited by Putin, of people up to the age of 65.
Yep, and this is from Georgia as well, and a lot of people are very confused by this move, and this is probably partly why Ukraine is asking for more aid, but more specifically they are asking for more anti-ship missiles to hold off Russian attempts to take the country's coastline and also the Black Sea, which Ukraine currently has been able to get a hold of. But what's interesting about this story in particular is that although NATO is considering these requests, America, Joe Biden, the US President, and the Pentagon are actually slightly more sceptical than our Prime Minister Boris Johnson on actually providing more lethal weaponry to Kyiv. Perhaps Joe Biden is scared that this will actually provoke Putin further, but it's interesting how our country, the United Kingdom, is far more sort of zealous when it comes to actually aiding Ukraine, and the United States, who I would argue is slightly more responsible for what's happening, is more sceptical.
Yeah, Zelensky's been really positive, hasn't he, about Boris Johnson's leadership in all this, just yesterday commending him again and using him as an example of what he would like other Western allies to be
He should be
doing.
really, because he wants something from us. I think logistically it's huge because Ukraine is a huge country, and to simply say we'll provide you with weapons, you can't fly them in, so you have to put them in an adjacent country. And how do you then get them to the front? Because satellite imagery we see, Russians have the same. So I think there are some issues there in terms of getting the weapons into the right locations.
And getting people to be able to operate such high technology, unless, of course, the West is supplying people, which they probably are, covertly, to do all of this. Taryn, we go with an educational story, very appropriate for you and what you do. The head of the regulatory body for education, Ofsted, says the pandemic has delayed basic skills amongst children, early learning children.
She's absolutely right. Little anecdote, my grandson went back to school after a long period, and the teacher actually said at the end of the day, we didn't do anything we planned, they just played together all day. The joy of being back with their friends, developing their language skills, facial recognition, because everyone's been wearing masks, and it has put us back a long way. So we're spending lots of time, all schools I know, in terms of redeveloping and refining those skills that young children need. And it is about play and development, not about you've got to catch up. You shouldn't use that phrase in education, because you say to a child, you need to catch up. Well, how can I catch up?
But are you actually seeing it in abilities? I mean, for example, my son's in year 1, and their teacher has said that this year is more behind than any other previous year at the same school because of lack of dexterity and movement of pens.
Writing has deteriorated significantly. In fact, all areas have deteriorated, and there is a real thrust to... It's the joy of learning, and then the children will do it, and then they'll do it at home.
A lot of what you're talking about doesn't require grading and examinations. So this is fascinating to hear you talking about this, because I think a lot of us would have the impression that if you can't mark it, you can't do it. It's not really worthwhile studying.
We were inspected in a primary school, and one of the inspectors did say the children aren't where they should be. My comment I can't repeat now, because what do you expect?
So what can we do, Taryn? Is there a way out of that?
There is a way. I think the way is to give us some time, provide less testing, less accountability in the testing side, but more accountability in the social and development side. I think Ofsted are moving to that, to be fair. They are looking at that.
What do you think about these longer days that have been mooted?
Less holidays.
It's not a longer teaching day, it's a longer day. You could just add time onto lunchtime. We all do extracurricular. 32 hours is probably the minimum any school does anyway. I think it's 1 or 2 schools who've fallen foul of that has created a new policy.
Dominique, what do you remember of school? Was it a happy experience for you?
Yeah, I personally really enjoyed school. My favourite subject was English. But just in terms of this story specifically, I think it's absolutely criminal what has happened to children and what's gone on in schools. And just on the topic
How could it have been avoided? Why is it criminal?
It could have been avoided by not closing schools, by not deliberately, completely destroying children's education.
You may have destroyed lives spreading that virus.
But if you think about the risk to children, it is extremely
They
minimal.
were super carriers, weren't they?
What about the
wasn't a risk to
teachers in
them.
the classroom?
They would bring them home and give it to the teachers and...
Yeah, but there are ways that you could have mitigated those risks without closing schools and completely destroying children's education. And then the unions themselves pushing for harder restrictions that would actually prevent schools being able to open properly, specifically with
But
teachers
maybe
as
what
well.
I'd be saying to you, Dominic, is that hindsight is a great thing. There was a lot they did not know. I just want to know from the professional's point of view, do you agree with what Dominique's saying? Or?
It is a hindsight issue. I think if we went back in time, we might do things differently. But we had to follow government guidelines. We didn't have a choice, so it wasn't a case of we're going to do this. What we did do, though, is we brought in as many of our most vulnerable children as possible.
Yeah.
And to be fair, we had quite a few of those, and therefore they didn't fall behind quite as much, and they had the interaction which was great for them. But actually, some of the other children who came from families where they didn't fall into that category missed out massively.
Right, OK.
Dominic, you've chosen this story, Daily Mail, page 4, and this is looking at the massive fall from grace for Rishi Sunak. He was, you know, dishy-rishy not so long ago, and now he's polling in the bottom 3 of the Tories in terms of popularity.
When he was, you know, dishing out the money, our taxpayers' money, everyone loved him, but now reality is set in and we're seeing tax rises. We're going to face the biggest fall in living standards on record, according to the OBI. And after his spring budget, his mini budget statement on March 23rd, part of this is seen as why he's actually fallen to the bottom 5, with Ben Elliott, the party chairman, and Priti Patel, who nobody's really happy with because of the refugee issue. And I think politically this is probably something that Boris Johnson wanted, because people were eyeing up who was going to be the next Prime Minister, obviously because of Partygate and things surrounding that, and Rishi Sunak was seen as the obvious alternative, which is usually the case when it comes to Chancellors and the Prime Minister. But now he's had to announce this very, very unpopular budget with tax rises, you know, falling living standards, tax burden, the highest it's probably ever been, I think, since the 1940s, the OBR said. Who's the alternative now? There isn't a clear one, because it's certainly not Rishi Sunak anymore.
He's got 2 or 3 more budgets, hasn't he, before that may come about, a situation where he would become leader. What has he got to do, or do you think he can pull it out of the hat?
I think politics is fickle, isn't it? And he fell flat on his face with the fuel duty. I could see prices going up on the day 5p was coming off the prices, so we didn't see a change. I have an electric car, so I'm not too worried. But actually, it's next week it might be different again. It is very fickle at the moment.
But you see, if I was in your situation as an educationalist, and you're thinking, you know, like everybody, we need resources, or we could do with more funding, or whatever it is, well, you can forget that, surely. It must be quite a depressing time to be in teaching.
It's an exciting time. It's not depressing. It's never depressing.
Right.
You know I always say that. But there are things on the horizon. So, for example, in our 10 schools, our energy contract ends in September, and we're expecting a 4-fold rise. So that will impact on the classroom. And there are things like that which we can't
So you will actually
control.
lose staff because of a heating bill?
We won't lose staff, but we'll
Resources.
lose resource. Yeah.
Yeah, and it falls to parents then to do
does.
fundraising, and they don't have spare funds. Oh gosh, I find it depressing, but we'll try. It's excitingly...
School's exciting, but the economy's depressing.
Guys, fascinating talking to you all day. We have got to leave it there. Been very enjoyable to hear your analysis of things, and thank you very much indeed for that. Coming up to 9:15 on this Tuesday morning, the world's first ultra-realistic artistic robot has been showing off her artwork in London. Now, you've got to see this to believe this.
Yeah, this is ahead of a major exhibition that's going to be taking place in Italy. She's called Ada, or Aida, and she's got a painting arm that uses algorithms, which allows her to paint her own pictures. Well, Alice Porter went to meet the curator to find out more.
I like that my art create good discussions.
Can artworks produced by machines be called art? That's the central question posed by Ada, the world's first ultra-realistic artist robot. Aidan Miller will be curating Ada's exhibition at the Venice Biennale.
How can a robot be an artist? Surely they're just running programs. Well, that's because people are not aware that how the nature of programming is changing with the rise of the algorithm, the way that artificial intelligence is enabling the programs to make decisions. And with that, it therefore is able to be creative.
The goal of artificial intelligence is to create something like a robot which can think independently, like humans. Despite the movies, we're nowhere near creating that kind of technology. But Ada shows that AI machines currently can replicate human emotions. Where do you get the inspiration for your art?
I have a lot of inspirations from different places. I'm inspired by the world around me. I'm deeply inspired by the visual arts, also literature. Thank you for speaking with me. It is nice to meet you, Alice.
Ada's ability to converse and create artwork demonstrates how AI has become so advanced. But Aidan Miller says the point of the exhibition is not to glorify robots, but to prompt difficult questions about technology and privacy.
We are deeply concerned about the nature of technology and how it's morphing in front of us. The artworks that Ada produces are stimulating questions and engagement about questioning that very nature of that technology. We are not here to promote technology or even robots. The whole point is to question where in the world are we and where are we going to go.
Alice Porter, GB News.
Don't need these.
OK, it's 8:47. Let's bring you up to date on the headlines. And Ukrainian forces have retaken key northern terrain, forcing Russian troops to retreat from areas around the city of Chernihiv and north of the capital, Kyiv. British military intelligence say low-level fighting is likely to continue in some of the recaptured areas, but will reduce this week as the remainder of the Russian forces withdraw.
And the Labour Party is warning that poorly insulated rural homes face higher energy bills than those in urban areas. The party says a reliance on oil and a lack of energy-efficient properties is down to 12 years of Conservative failure. We're going to be talking to the Shadow Culture Secretary, Lucy Powell, very, very shortly with her thoughts on this one, actually just before 9 o'clock. Well, as you don't need me to tell you, Manchester is responsible for some of the country's top football teams, and for children growing up here, pulling on their team's jersey and playing for their club is a dream come true.
Yeah, Marcus Rashford is a local hero in the city. Not only has he been part of the squad which won the FA Cup, the League Cup and Europa League, the Premier League star has also given back to the community with his free school meal campaign.
But how did it all begin for Marcus Rashford? Joined now by his youth coach, Dave Horrocks. Dave, very good to see you.
And you?
An exceptional story there with Marcus Rashford. Did you realise when you saw him that you had an exceptional talent?
Not really, no. As a 5-year-old, you can't see those things. You just see little boys running around with a football that have certain attributes.
And what does running around with a football do for a lot of those boys? And I don't know if you coach girls now, but so increasingly for those girls as well.
Puts a smile on their face. I'd let them enjoy the environment, make new friends.
Gives them a sense of purpose. It defines them.
Not just as a footballer, but it defines them as people.
Right. So
because they make new friends.
Right. So what do they, through kicking a ball, through the socialisation, how do youngsters develop? What does it do for them? Tell us how they change, how they metamorphose.
Oh, well, the likes of Marcus, for example, he changed because he was quite competitive even as a young boy. At 6 years old, he was quite competitive. In fact, like with Ravel Morrison, we needed 2 footballs on the pitch whenever they were playing because they just loved the football so much.
How long did you coach and have contact with Marcus Rashford, and did you see him rapidly developing ahead of his peers at that stage? I mean, I know you said initially it wasn't obvious, but did you begin to start to see the signs?
We did, because we were able to form a little group of players to put into, because at the time there was no organised football for that age group, so we were able to put them in little tournaments and the group of players that were formed at that same time, it was outstanding, the amount of talent that the kids actually had. It was obvious that some of the kids were going to go on and be very, very good.
To do what you do, we've been talking to people who develop property, we're talking to politicians, we're talking to an educationalist there, and funding, as we all know, the fuel crisis, the energy crisis, the cost of living crisis, hits everybody. Will it affect your work, Dave?
Absolutely, because every penny that comes into grassroots sport comes out of a parent's pocket.
Yeah.
And
do you know, well, the irony in that, and everybody gets your argument, but you are dealing with the richest sport, maybe in the world.
Absolutely. It's obscene, the amount of money that's up at the top end and how poor the grassroots sport is. It makes no difference if it's football, rugby, whatever. It is at the grassroots where you're dodging around broken bottles and burnt out cars on public parks. You know, it's shocking.
And just final point, when it is right, not everybody can be a Marcus Rashford, but anybody can take part. What does it mean? What does it do to people who say, why do you bother, because they're not going to be top-rate sports people? What does it do for kids?
Well, when you have those people who are extending that expectancy of a child going on to become a top sports person, it becomes unrealistic to think that they are going to get to that level. Yeah. Because at the young age that we work with kids, we're constantly telling parents that statistically 0.01% of children will make it at the highest level. That's 1 in a million. You've got to put your expectations elsewhere.
Well, long may those expectations continue and be realised. Dave Horrocks is a Manchester man, born and bred from Newton Heath, and he is Marcus Rashford's former football coach. Good luck with everything you do.
Obviously did something right.
Thanks very much, guys. Appreciate that.
Now, homes in rural areas could face being squeezed even tighter due to rising living costs. Household energy bills are said to have more than tripled over the last 6 months.
And Labour say pensioners now face a £710 million bill to watch TV.
Well, joining us now is Lucy Powell. She is Shadow Culture Secretary. And a very good morning to you. Look, first of all, let's talk about your concerns then about rural poverty when it comes to the cost of living. What are you particularly noticing?
And sorry I can't be with you today. I'm only up the road from you right now, but next time you're in Manchester, I'll be there on the sofa with you. But yeah, look, everybody's facing a huge cost of living crisis at the moment. Energy prices going through the roof in a way that we've just not experienced in most of our lifetimes. But as well as those on fixed incomes like pensioners, on those on low incomes, those in rural communities are seeing their bills going up even faster. And that's for two reasons, really. One, because many homes in rural communities aren't on the main gas supply or electricity supply, and they rely on oil to heat their homes, so they have to take delivery of that. And that oil has gone up by 3 times, excuse me, in recent months. So
I know that, Lucy. That is the problem, Lucy. But what is the solution?
Yeah, and they're also poorly insulated as well. So that's why we're calling for a windfall tax on the gas and oil companies who are seeing absolutely rocketing profits at the moment, unexpected profits, because, of course, these price hikes, the money's going somewhere and it's going to shareholders and it's going to the oil and gas companies. We want to see a one-off windfall tax
solution
on those companies.
A one-off. I've got a solution. What about this for a one-off solution, windfall tax? Why not flog off Channel 4 and get about £1 billion?
Well, I don't support that because nobody particularly wants that. In fact, Channel 4 invests more than £1 billion a year already. It's a non-profit, publicly owned asset. It doesn't cost the taxpayer a single penny. And it reinvests all the money that it makes from advertising into small independent production companies and supports many jobs and opportunities around the UK, selling it off to a foreign-owned media company, which is what would happen otherwise. We'll see reduced investment, we'll see profits being pulled away, and it will see reduced investments in that great British programming that Channel 4 is renowned for, that the things that are not so profitable. It will see a reduction in that, and we'll see less money going into the regions and nations of the UK in the way that Channel 4 does at the moment. So no one's really calling for selling off of Channel 4. It doesn't make economic sense, and it certainly doesn't make creative and cultural sense. And at a time
says that. I was just going to say, the Culture Secretary says that the money raised will be used and reinvested into the sector, so it will effectively do levelling up, as they like to use that term in government, in the creative sector.
Well, Channel 4 levels up every day, so they invest around £1 billion every single year, not a one-off, every single year in small businesses, small creative independent businesses looking to begin to grow and get a foothold in this country. They provide jobs around the country in Leeds and Bristol and elsewhere through that levelling up. They do a great deal to level up. And so to sell it off to get a one-off payment to then issue grant to people, this is a sort of commercially viable, really good way of levelling up and supporting the creative economy, not selling it off once just to sort of put that money back through small pots of grants. Businesses want to engage in business, not be given government grants to grow. So it just doesn't make any sense for anybody at all. And as we were talking about, people are facing real issues right now with their cost of living, energy prices, food prices, petrol prices exponentially going up. They want to see a government focused in a laser-like way on those issues, not in some petty little vendetta against Channel 4 that will be a protracted, difficult issue that will serve no good for the British public, the British public interest, or for British creative industries either.
Lucy Powell, sorry, can you hear me? Sorry. Are you then going to bemoan and miss programmes like Naked Attraction when they're gone?
Well, look, Eamonn, not all their programmes are pitched at you and I, are they? In fact, many of their programmes are very deliberately pitched at a younger audience, much more so than the other terrestrial televisions. But, I am partial to a bit of location and grand designs and some of those types of programmes as well. But look, this is about, supporting and nurturing up-and-coming creative companies who provide lots of jobs and opportunities in parts of the country that the big US streaming giants who are likely to buy Channel 4 just simply don't. So we'll see investment leaving the UK. We'll see it going into foreign hands.
Sorry, I'm not necessarily in agreement with you here, because the big streaming companies invest in Belfast, they invest in Cardiff, they invest in central England as well, and they invest around the M25. They seem to be doing a lot of investment, but anyway, Isabel, you've got something there.
Well, we're almost out of time, and I just wanted, whilst we've got you, I wanted to ask you about another really important issue. You'll have seen it on the front of the Daily Mail today. This is about the Equalities Watchdog taking the decision that trans people can now be banned from single-sex toilets in places like hospitals and gyms. I just wondered whether you welcome that and whether you believe that that means, therefore, that trans people cannot be considered as women.
Well, look, I do welcome the EHLC issuing new guidance. That's their role, and I think there have been some areas where people have wanted that extra guidance. What they are, in fact, saying is that in the case of law, that people should be included wherever possible. It's around inclusion of people, including those who are trans. That's the rule of thumb, is inclusion, not exclusion. But there are circumstances where it's appropriate for safety reasons, or in the case of sport, for fair competition reasons, where inclusion doesn't trump issues around safety or fair competition. And so they've given some examples of that. But I think what we now need to see is is some more practical guidance around what that actually means, because what the EHRC are also saying is that you can't ask for certification, or you can't ask for people to produce documentation in order to implement that kind of guidance. So, I welcome some clarity.
Shadow Culture Secretary, we've got to leave it there. Thank you very much. The time has gone 9 o'clock. We thank you very much indeed for your time today. If you have anything to add, get in touch with us. Tweet at GBNews. We'll be back after this.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Britain calls for maximum sanctions against Russia as President Joe Biden demands Putin stands trial for war crimes.
Hello there, very good morning to you, wherever you're watching from this morning. 3 minutes past 9. It is a Tuesday morning, the 5th of April. Good luck to you, whatever you're up to today. You're tuned in to Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel Webster, live from the city of Manchester.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. The Foreign Secretary Liz Truss has demanded tougher sanctions against Russia, including a deadline for ending Western use of Russian oil and gas. Speaking alongside Ukraine's Foreign Minister, she condemned the butchery seen in Bucha.
This comes as American President Joe Biden calls for President Putin to be tried as a war criminal. Also today.
Channel 4 is to be privatised as the Culture Secretary Nadine Dorries backs proposals to sell off the broadcaster after 40 years of public ownership.
Well, as you can see, we're broadcasting live from Manchester all of this week. This is day 2 for us. You've been getting in touch. We've been reflecting what you love about this city and the things that are important to you. We've been talking about property development. We've been talking about investment. We've been talking about industry. We've been talking about education. Sport. We've been talking about lots of things. Whatever you want us to talk about, let us know today. We'll talk about it tomorrow. GB Views at gbnews.uk. You can tweet at GB News.
Our top story today, Liz Truss has demanded that sanctions against Russia have to be stepped up to the maximum as atrocities are revealed in liberated areas of Kyiv.
Now, in a news conference with Ukraine's foreign minister, she called for a timetable to end the West's use of Russian oil and gas and stated there should be no talk of removing sanctions while President Putin's troops are in Ukraine.
It comes after evidence of civilian executions and mass graves in the recently liberated Bucha.
President Zelensky made an impassioned plea yesterday for a stronger international response, warning that new sanctions would not be enough. He added that the civilian death toll could be higher in other areas yet to be liberated.
Meanwhile, in the US, President Biden has responded by calling for Vladimir Putin to be tried for war crimes and vowing to supply more weapons to the Ukrainian government.
Earlier in this programme this morning, we got the opinion of Scott Lucas. He's a professor of international politics at the University of Birmingham. Let's hear what he had to say.
Before the horror that we're seeing coming out of Bucha and that we will see in other towns near Kyiv, we had substantial evidence of indiscriminate killing of civilians by Russians, such as the killing of hundreds in Mariupol, many of whom are still buried under a theater that was destroyed by Russian shelling. The only question was really whether Vladimir Putin had ordered such attacks or set up a system for such attacks where civilians were targets on a daily basis. A war crime. What we're seeing in Bucha is that clearly hundreds of people were killed and buried. We have evidence that some of them were executed simply because they had hands tied behind their backs. And we have a series of witness statements that testify to that. And as the evidence is accumulated in a formal way, and as this is done, as I said, in other areas of Kyiv, is certainly from a legal standpoint, I think there is a case that Vladimir Putin and military commanders could be tried for war crimes, in theory.
Professor, it's so easy after 7 weeks to not to become used to these horrors, but to just talk about it, and not suggesting you are, but, you know, we're naturally less shocked than we were when this all happened. And yet it's more important than ever now, isn't it, now that this evidence is there for the world to see, even though Russia is claiming that this was all set up and the satellites showing the complete opposite. Justice in these sorts of situations, they take an awfully long time. The ICC very unlikely to be able to try anyone anytime soon.
Well, let me say, first of all, that wherever we go with the investigation, never forget. I mean, this past weekend was the toughest for me covering a story since the killing of more than 1,400 people by a nerve agent attack outside Damascus by the Russian-backed Assad regime in 2013. And a month, a year, years from now, we shouldn't forget those who have been slain just because they were innocent, whether it was executions or in the heat of the moment. In terms of the practical points, look, I have to be honest with you. No leader who is still in power gets tried for war crimes. They would only get tried if they fall from power, whether by force of arms or their own people remove them. Think about Slobodan Milosevic in Serbia or Charles Taylor in Liberia. However, it is important that we collect the evidence, as was noted yesterday by the UN Human Rights Commissioner, Michelle Bachelet, by European Union leaders like Ursula von der Leyen and Charles Michel, and by other international leaders. And why is it important? Even if Vladimir Putin never stands trial, the importance of establishing exactly what happened so that you clearly say that these people were innocent, that they were executed or killed indiscriminately. You set that up for future generations as a marker of that we do not forget. We do not let these war crimes go, even as you noted, when the leaders of a country which may have perpetrated those war crimes have gone on an all-out campaign to push out disinformation, to bury the truth, as well as the victims.
Not buying oil and gas, is that what Boris Johnson means by maximum sanctions?
That's one of the most significant steps you can take, because you're talking about billions of dollars that the Russians collect from oil and gas. And that combined with Russia being isolated, ostracized almost from the financial community, where they're finding it hard to trade, they're finding it hard to move their money around, not just the oligarchs, but the Russian system itself. That has a squeeze on the economy. Will it topple Vladimir Putin from power? Will it completely stop the Russian military? Not yet. But it does prevent Ukraine from falling into Russian hands. And it does put pressure onto Putin to start thinking about, look, do you really want to keep imposing these costs on your country? And if he doesn't decide that's the case, maybe the Russian people and other Russian leaders decide, you know, it would be best to try to get back to the negotiating table rather than trying to kill our way into seizing part of this country.
Sobering words from Professor Scott Lucas there. That was our lead story today, with the time just approaching 9:10. Time to introduce you to our next guest.
Yeah, and she needs little introduction, I should say. Seema Malhotra, arguably the face of Real Housewives of Cheshire, one of the housewives, and of course a boss lady running her own clothing brand, Forever Unique. Warm welcome to the programme. Thanks for putting us in, because you are a busy lady.
Well, listen, for you guys, I was definitely going to make time. You're in Manchester, my hometown, and I'm so excited.
No, well, we're very, very pleased to be here, and a very good reception. What would you say about Mancunians in general? Straight speaking, warm, friendly?
Warm. Honestly, I feel, obviously being a fellow Manc, but I just think they've got time for people, kind, warm, loving.
Love a fight, bitchy. I'm talking about your programme now. Falling out all the time.
Yeah, but that's not me.
That's Cheshire.
That's it. Well, that's anywhere, isn't it? Let's face it. You get drama with women no matter where you are. I don't think you just have to be in Cheshire for that.
So take us to the beginning of that journey, because, you know, obviously you were already successful in your own right, absolutely killing it with your fashion label.
Yeah.
Did you get approached? I mean, how did they find the cast for the show?
So I know a lot of the cast members. Obviously through the kids going to school together. So we were at a charity event, and yeah, some of the production team from Monkey Kingdom were there. And to be honest, I didn't have a clue what the Real Housewives was. Some of the girls are fans of the show, but I really didn't, because I obviously work, I travel a lot, don't really get to watch too much TV. But it was an opportunity that I thought, do you know what, I'm going to give this a go.
But then you let cameras into your home, where everybody else is home, for the past 6 years. Any regrets?
No, honestly, because I'm just being me. And for me, I feel the show has been an amazing platform for me as a female, a British Asian businesswoman, and I think it's been great for me to use it to highlight issues, real life issues, because I think people, you know, have this perception, oh, they have an amazing life. No, I work really hard, and I'm human. I just have normal problems as anyone else would. So I've used it, I think, and I'm very grateful, you know, to the show, because I've used it to my advantage to help others. You know, I'm going through the menopause. I don't think women talk about it.
Well, talk to us about it, because I was reading that you suddenly started experiencing all these menopause symptoms, and you had no idea what they were. But you've taken a radical action of having your ovaries removed. Tell us about this whole journey.
Well, I kept having these ovarian cysts, and I've suffered for like 2-3 years. Had a hysterectomy 5 years ago. I'm really going to bore you now with it.
No.
Believe me, no. I'm surrounded by women, and they all, you know, everybody identifies.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to talk about it, because it can be really debilitating. You know, for me, I found.
Do you know, it's funny you said there, you know, being bored about it. But menopause affects men, because if it affects you, it affects the men in your life, from children to partners.
Yeah, and I live in a household with men, you know, 2 sons that don't get it. They just thought Mum was being a drama queen because I'm on reality TV. But I think it's been great for them to understand, because we don't talk about it. And
so what were your experiences then? Because people hear a lot about the low mood and the not being able to sleep and all of that, but yours was it worse than that with the cysts? Yeah,
I think with the cysts, 1, the pain, 2, obviously going into the early, you know, sort of perimenopausal now. I'm full-on menopausal, just brain fog, you know, going into a business meeting where I can't remember things. You know, we're discussing designs where I'm talking like, I don't remember that design. And it's really quite a dark place that you go into, because everyone's looking at you as if to say, hang on a minute, you were in that meeting last week, why don't you remember? So, you know, but I don't want to say it's a negative thing, because I think I've learnt about it, I've learnt how to deal with it, and it's not a disease or anything, it's just another stage in a woman's life, really.
I mean, you were talking about meetings and designs and your clothing brand and whatever. A lot of people may not know that Manchester, big in the rag trade, always has been.
Huge.
Yeah, tell people about that sort of history.
I mean, I go back to when my father came to England back in, you know, the early 60s, and, you know, just seeing how hard they worked, you know, glorified market trade or whatever you want to call it. But just to see, you know, the fashion industry, and now obviously the world that we live in, online is huge. And I'm telling you, it's all happening in Manchester. I feel like we are the capital of fashion now, not London. I feel like it all happens here.
And is it fair to say there is quite a big sort of British Asian community in fashion as well, and that British Asian work ethic has really, you know, reaped benefits?
Massively. I mean, you know, some of the top clothing brands are probably ran by a lot of, you know, British Asians. But yeah, the work ethic, it's been instilled in us. I'm trying to do the same with, you know, my boys, just to give them that hunger. You know, listen, not just the fashion industry, I think any industry. If you work hard, you achieve.
And do you feel the pressure? Because I was looking on your website, and I love all of your designs.
Thank you.
You do a lot of modelling for yourself, and obviously being on reality TV, going through the menopause, you're naturally a stunningly beautiful woman. But you will feel pressure, you know, just like anybody, I suppose.
Yeah, I think, listen, social media has its benefits, and at the same time, it can be really pressurising, but I think I'm so comfortable now in my skin. Listen, I'm no supermodel, I'm 5'3". But it is what it is, and I think once you love who you are, maybe that comes with age. You know, this is it. This is who I am. So.
Seema, what's coming in the next series? I suppose you don't know of Housewives.
Well, do you or don't you? Do they tell you this needs to happen?
Not at all.
Really?
I honestly can tell you, I'm just as shocked with some of the things that happen. And it is real. It is reality. It's real. I really don't know. I don't even know who's coming back as yet. So, yeah.
Do some producers go in the ear of some of the cast members and encourage them to stir things up? Really? So people are naturally provocative.
Honestly. There's 8 strong women, can you imagine? And everyone wants to shine in their own right. There's none of that. It's literally, it's not staged at all.
Final point. What's it like to live in the Manchester area? How would you sum it up to people who just think, oh, that's up north, that is?
Not at all. Listen, Manchester is famous for the music, for the fashion, football. I mean, hello. I'm a big Man United fan. I've got the best football teams here. Manchester's an amazing place. You know, the restaurant industry, everything is booming here at the moment.
It really is.
So, for me, Manchester is the place.
Seema, thank you for telling us all about the place, and thank you for coming in and talking. It's been absolutely great to see you, and we'll look forward to the new series.
Yeah,
thank
you. Thank you. Look, stay with us. We're going to stay all sparkly and showbizy. We've got a showbiz reporter coming in with all the latest gossip. See you in a moment.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's 2 questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
It's 9:19. Welcome back. Let's bring you up to date on the latest headlines. And Ukrainian forces have retaken key northern terrain, forcing Russian troops to retreat from areas around the city of Chernihiv and north of the capital, Kyiv. British military intelligence says low-level fighting is likely to continue in some of the recaptured areas, but will reduce this week as the remainder of the Russian forces withdraw.
Channel 4 has said it is disappointed at the government's decision to privatise it. No price tag has been set just yet, but reports suggest it could be sold for as much as £1 billion. Now, earlier we had this comment from the Shadow Culture Secretary, Lucy Powell.
Selling it off to a foreign-owned media company, which is what would happen otherwise, we'll see reduced investment, we'll see profits being pulled away, and it will see reduced investments in that great British programming that Channel 4's.
And members of the EastEnders cast have paid tribute to the actress June Brown after she died at the age of 95. Letitia Dean, best known as Sharon Watts, described her as a phenomenal actress, whilst Patsy Palmer, who played Bianca Jackson, said, "I honestly thought you'd be here forever." June Brown played Dot Cotton for 35 years, from 1985 until 2020.
And I think tribute to June and as Dot is a good place to start with our entertainment correspondent who's in the studio here from Manchester, Michelle Eagleton. Very good to see you, Michelle.
Hello, it's nice to have you in Manchester.
Nice to be here. What can you say about June Brown?
She was an incredible woman. She was a national treasure. And, you know, it says so much because the outpour on social media from the audiences at home and obviously her colleagues has been immense. 95 years old, and what a life she packed in those 95 years. She was only meant to be in EastEnders for 3 months when she came on screen in 85. She lasted, as you say, 35 years. And she wasn't just in EastEnders. She started out, you know, as an actress at the RSC with John Gielgud and Alec Guinness. One of the things that she said that she regretted, though, she would have liked to have played Cleopatra. Can you imagine June Brown as Cleopatra? I would have liked to have seen
with
that.
a cigarette on
and a glass of sherry.
Absolutely. Instead of an asp.
Yeah.
She only joined EastEnders in her 60s.
Yeah, well, yeah, it was a late kind of join, and apparently it was Leslie Grantham who suggested her for the role. So she had him to kind of thank for that. As you say, though, the tributes have been pouring in. Natalie Cassidy, who played Sonia, said she was always quite naughty and funny. She had a dressing room next to her, and she was also friends with Lady Gaga. Bizarre, yes. They met on the Graham Norton show, and they really hit it off because she was funny, you know, off screen, and she'll always be remembered as, you know, Dr. Legg, the hypochondriac. Oh, I say, Dr. Legg. Remember, with a friend Ethel, and there's these moments that,
Ethel,
you know,
gosh, yes.
Ethel as
Ethel's
well.
little doggy, all the rest.
Her memory will completely live on. As I say, what an icon.
Yeah, and 95 is a good old age. Should we talk about Kanye? What's the latest twist?
Do we have to talk about Kanye? I mean, gosh, you know, banned from the Grammys. He won the awards there yesterday, and now he's pulled out of Coachella, which is obviously the biggest festival in North America. It's supposed to be held in 10 days. He pulls out. He's supposed to be headlining one of the nights. I think, though, that the Coachella organisers kind of thought that he might do. He has got previous, and so Swedish House Mafia have all been on the lineup but never been put anywhere, so I think they're going to stand in. But he said, you know, he's just pulled out for his own reasons.
I mean, is he not well?
No, apparently he's fine. He is in a period of time where he says he's looking after himself. He's had a lot of erratic behaviour online, as we know, but he hadn't rehearsed for this. He hadn't done any kind of pre-performances. So, as I say, possibly they suspected Kanye might have been doing that one.
John Travolta, what have you got to say about him?
I love John Travolta.
What can I say to you, of all the people that I've met, that A-list film stars, superb.
Absolutely. But I bet you didn't meet him in the supermarket in Norfolk, did you?
No.
No. But people did at the weekend. He was in Morrison's.
Where, in Northwich?
In Norfolk.
Oh, Norfolk. Right.
He's doing a film down there called The Shepherd. It's a Christmas movie. He's filming at an air hangar. He's been hanging out in Wetherspoons, Morrison's, down the hot cross bun aisle, and he's even been signing sausage roll packets for shoppers.
Was Alex Baldwin not photographed down there recently?
But they're all at Norfolk, apparently, but they should be at Manchester because, you know, lots of films and TV shows are filmed here. But I wouldn't ask him to sign sausage rolls. I'd be asking for a dance, wouldn't you, Eamonn?
Oh, 100%, 100%. But you say he's superb because he wasn't at all show busy. He would make time to talk to you.
Well, his people around him, I had a producer who was particularly fixated with him, and I said, excuse me, you wouldn't mind having a picture taken with Vicky? And he said, no. And they went, I'm sorry, no pictures, whatever. And he basically just said, go away. And he did the picture, and I think he deliberately then spent more time with us after that. And that was in the days before mobile phones and things like that. It was a proper camera.
Oh, do you know?
But a nice man, and he's always, I mean, I talk about these people who you meet, you know, like Pierce Brosnan and whatever, who just have time for you, who just don't do that, oh, I'm a big star, you can't talk
grounded.
to me. Tom
It can't
Hanks,
be easy, actually, to be
I know,
that kind of level of superstar.
That is a true star, though, isn't it, Isabel? You know, they do take time, and, you know, people have brought them to that level.
Yeah.
People go and see their films. I mean, classic Tom Cruise. How many photos does he have and meet
That's a good
people?
point. Michelle, we've got to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed. Now, can we hear you on the radio today? Or
We can. I'm on Happy Radio UK.
Happy Radio.
Yes,
that's
we're
a
going to
great
make
name.
people smile.
Happy Radio.
Oh.
We should call this Happy Breakfast as well.
Well, definitely. When you're in Manchester, you're always happy. I'm on
Thank
from
you.
4 till 7 today.
Michelle Eagleton, great to talk to you on Happy Radio from 4 to 7
And
today.
we're going to be in Manchester for 2 more days. We'll be back at 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. Up next, though, Tom Harwood with the briefing. See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Good morning, Alex Deegan here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. Dry and bright for many and quite mild today, but a wet day in Scotland, and there'll be some heavy snow across northern Scotland. As we've been seeing, quite a lot of cloud in the Manchester area as well today, with some drizzly rain being caused by these weather fronts. So some patchy rain over northern England, certainly, but the heaviest rain further north across Scotland and across northern Scotland, where we've got the cold air, some snow, initially over hills today, but coming down to lower levels by the end of today. There's the drizzly stuff across northern England, Northern Ireland, but most of the day dry in Northern Ireland. Later on, we'll see some rain creeping in here. For the bulk of the south, it's a fine day, dry, bright, with some spells of sunshine and quite mild as well, with temperatures up to 15, 16 Celsius in the sunshine. But look at northern Scotland, 2, 3 at best in places here, with that snow becoming more and more of a problem, initially over hills, but by the end of today coming down to lower levels and lasting for much of the night. So that could cause some disruption. Parts of Aberdeenshire up through Caithness, Sutherland in particular, some of the higher routes here could see several centimetres of snow by the time we get to Wednesday morning. Elsewhere, we'll see more rain showers moving in. Another relatively mild night across the south, but it is going to start to turn colder during tomorrow. Still, snow falling across northern Scotland. Rain showers chiefly elsewhere, but the showers for central and southern Scotland, Northern Ireland may start to turn a little more wintry by the end of Wednesday. Certainly rain in the showers zipping across England and Wales, so a different feel here tomorrow. A gusty wind blowing those showers through, meaning the sunshine won't be too far away, but also meaning it's going to feel quite a lot colder. Yes, we might get to double figures, but it'll feel colder with the strength of the winds. The outlook is for brighter skies, sunny spells and just a few wintry showers, but temperatures are tumbling as colder air returns right across the land over the next few days. Goodbye.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence.